when no one can be that unlucky twice in a row, but right before getting crushed into pulp by a speeding truck for the second time, he actually believed that. Smashed into tiny pieces by a truck in his original world, he had just scrambled. Up in a new world, admired his handsome face in a glass window, when a second truck launched him into the sky. As he soared, he heard the driver muttering about finishing two distinct orders, one transmigrator and one for a survival game, wondering if those two souls were actually interdimensional counterparts. Counterparts, my foot, he cursed inwardly, since his mouth could no longer form a single word. When he came to, he was standing in soft pale yellow light facing a glowing orb that looked suspiciously like a cheap knockoff. He silently begged it not to say. This was the God space. It dumped basic information straight into his head instead. This really was an infinite level clearing game, but the worlds he would visit involved no high-tier nonsense like clashing supremes or an obliterated heavenly Tao. The truck driver had basically spilled the answer, the wish corridor. The survival game space, there were two ways in, the common way replying to a random message with a wish and clearing worlds proportional to that wish's difficulty. The second way, his, was for people who died violent deaths dragged in by accident with no wish. For them, the only exit was clearing 10 worlds after which they returned home with their earnings and were resurrected. He breathed out in relief. 10 worlds sounded easier than a single resurrection comeback match, especially since the corridor only used worlds where survival was the main challenge, and he was a long-time gamer. The orb explained each mission had at least 2 participants, no upper limit, strictly player versus environment, which suited him perfectly. But wait, before he could read more, the orb started flashing, furiously urging him to transmigrate. 3 translucent hexagonal badges materialized: talent, skill, and wonder. The newbie benefit was a random bronze tier draw. Talent was innate, skill acquired, wonder a special item. Each tiered bronze, silver, gold, and legendary. He considered his options, bronze talents and skills stayed within human limits, and the skill pool was so vast it could dump a basic math skill on him, so he picked wonder since a bronze wonder still carried some miraculous ability. He tapped it, cyan motes converged into a finger-sized metal whistle, a dog-calling whistle. Bronze tier, summoning 2 Alaskan malamutes for 1 hour, smart enough to follow most commands once per day with a midnight refresh. His eyes lit up, too. Malamutes was a serious draw, the only worries being the short duration and warm climate intolerance. The orb's flashing was so blinding now that he gave up reading and transmigrated. No sensation, just a blur. Then the temperature plunged. The pale yellow became a pitch-black cave, the entrance ahead opening onto a vast, wide expanse. Honestly, this freezing landscape was exactly what he needed. The winter setting suited his wonder perfectly. A panel surfaced, black text on white, snowflakes drifting along the border, a 3-dimensional model of him. On the left, his name above, an hourglass below, counting down 99 days, 23 hours, 58 minutes, a full 100 days. He pinched the bridge of his nose, the right side. Skipped basic attributes, listing age and height before 2 slots of hexagonal badges. The first slot held 3, 2 bronze and 1 translucent, instant. First up is his bronze reaction talent, peak human reflexes. They trigger massive bursts during a crisis. He also has invisible affinity. That talent pairs a handsome face with a gentle, disarming vibe. His third badge is completely unawakened. His skill slot is barren. Only 1 bronze skill exists, a gamer-style survival expert. This grants basic survival knowledge pulled from games, with a mocking 0 score. Talk about insulting. Suddenly, a movement behind him makes him spin around. A dark shape shifts in the dim cave. Every transmigration involves partners. This must be his teammate, and combat is discouraged here anyway. The cave is too dark. He can only spot a short dress. A sweater is tied around her waist, her hair in a ponytail. It is a strange outfit. Anyone preparing would pack warm clothes. She has absolutely nothing. He is still in his spring casuals too. Either she died suddenly, too, or items cannot cross the corridor. Perhaps she just assumed the weird invitation was a total prank. She notices him and gasps, asking if the Isekai email was real. Complaining she thought it was a joke, she mutters under her breath. She shivers, saying it is freezing. Her voice is sweet and crisp. Even though she speaks Japanese, he understands every word clearly. Suddenly, intense social anxiety hits him hard, like he is possessed. She sounds like a teen, and teaming up makes complete survival sense. Rubbing her freezing arms, she steps forward, letting him see her clearly. Russell completely freezes. She's wearing the exact short dress and sweater. Blonde hair styled in a side ponytail, with stunning sapphire eyes. Her face perfectly blends cute and fragile features. It is Hayasaka AI. There is no mistake, this rift literally dropped a two-dimensional goddess. Talk about a dream scenario, she is basically his ultimate anime crush. Kaguya's brilliant maid from a high-ranking family branch. Part Irish, shockingly smart, and highly skilled in close combat. A massive fan favorite, suddenly she notices his intense stare. Her sapphire eyes narrow, he can practically hear her mind racing. Wondering if he recognizes her as a fellow high school student. She almost uses her fake identity, but decides on her real name. Shaking off his daze, he nods and introduces himself as Russell. Offering a quick handshake, he suddenly hesitates in the freezing cave. He begins pulling back, figuring she might prefer to avoid physical contact. Seeing this, she relaxes, tagging him as a safe introvert. She grabs his hand, shaking it firmly, time to use her Jaru persona. Giggling, she calls Russell a cool name and says to call her Hayasaka. Her fingertips are freezing. He suggests they find her something warm. Turning away, he trips on his foot and almost crashes down. She catches him, calling him Russell Kun, and asks if he is okay. Then she spots two partially filled hiking backpacks on the floor. Crouching down, she asks if they belong to him, still playing bubbly. She jokes about only bringing snacks and makeup instead of survival gear. She complains cutely, but Russell tells her they are not his, while opening. One, he notices her phrasing has quietly confirmed something useful, bringing in. Supplies in advance did not work. Inside are two identical packs with thermal. Underwear, thin jackets, trousers, 2 packs of biscuits, and 2 bottles of water and a small box of matches, sized differently. Russell tells her it has to be a newbie gift pack, and she tilts her head, asking innocently what that means, making Russell sigh inwardly. A girl who can build a computer at whim cannot be ignorant of such basic concepts, but he lets her keep acting. He explains the benefits since the system wants them to survive rather than die immediately, and tells her to dress immediately or she will become a popsicle. Within 2 minutes outside, she squeaks in agreement, warning him not to peek. Her dressing speed is easily twice his own. By the time Russell has finished his thermal underwear, she has already tucked her skirt into her pants and pulled on her sweater. He shoulders his pack, heading for the cave entrance. With her skipping right behind, agreeing the cave will be unlivable by nightfall, she hands him the decision on where to go next, asking if they should find better shelter. She clearly has her own plan, waiting to see if his is reasonable. Is reasonable, Russell strokes his chin, explaining that since these worlds are based on survival games, the primary goal is identifying which game. At the cave entrance, he smiles. Talk about a major stroke of luck. This is the long dark a game he has played. She blinks and shakes her head decisively. The honest reaction this time, although she builds computers and keeps up with mobile games to fit in with the Jaru clique, a slow computer game requiring hours of sitting is unaffordable for a maid spending her days serving the eldest young lady. Russell gives her a quick rundown. The game is set in winter in Maple Leaf country on Great Bear Island, with residents gone, leaving behind abandoned houses and factories. It has survival mode with only the player, and a story mode with non-player characters, and Russell privately hopes for survival, since armed humans and shadows are far worse than wild animals. She stares at the white expanse and complains that just hearing about winter in Maple Leaf country makes her feel cold. Then asks where to. Russell points ahead. She cups her hands like a telescope, squints and guesses it is a log cabin. He nods, relieved, and tells her they have landed on Mystery Lake, the beginner map he knows best, and the building ahead is its landmark, Trapper's Cabin. The silhouette alone tells him exactly where they are. They start moving, her stomping her feet in her little leather shoes. Walking ahead, Russell feeds her crucial information. Wildlife has multiplied, with humans gone, leaving deer, wolves, rabbits, and even capercaillies. While bears and moose are much rarer and more dangerous, cougars exist but arrive much later, so he leaves them out. She bites her lip, exhaling white breath, and asks worriedly if there are really bears. No acting this time. Then she knows close quarters combat against a bear is suicide. Russell tells her bear spawn points are relatively fixed in the game, and he vaguely remembers them, so avoiding them in advance should probably work. She giggles and says Russell is really reliable, quickening her pace. They cross a hilltop where snow sinks to their calves, cold seeping in instantly. Russell had been. Even as a northerner, Russell had rarely seen such extreme snow. Glancing sideways, Hayasaka smiled back immediately, though her pale face looked far worse than in. The cave he abandoned, gathering kindling, knowing any delay risked a dangerous collapse. At the top, the view opened to a clearing with a ruined wooden shed beside a withered tree, with the clearing sloping down into a circular valley where gray snow rabbits foraged. To the left stood trappers. Home fully intact and perched like a lonely tower. He promised this was the spot. Providing solid shelter, a stove, and perhaps a rifle, she shivered but kept her energy up, poking his arm and calling him Mr. Guide as she urged them forward. Russell scanned the area warily. A sharp glint crossed her face before she asked what he was watching for. Wolves, perhaps. He whispered that a bear den was nearby. Recalling that bears and moose often spawned in this freezing area, she wrinkled her nose and quickened her pace. Moving past the valley, she stole a few glances at the rabbits, happily noting they were a great food source then. Admitting catching them barehanded was impossible, he put on a relieved expression and told her it was a good thing she did not just see them as meat. She replied. Bunnies were cute, but her stomach was far more important, speaking in a squeaky voice. Their luck held, avoiding any wild beasts, and they reached the cabin. He pushed the creaking wooden handle, and his heart settled when the door swung open. Just like the game, it was unlocked with no glass to shatter. Inside, a scent of old wood and rancid animal fat hit them. Frowning, they quickly shut the door, heavy enough to block the wind. The cabin was still icy compared to a heated room, but their body heat slowly began to rise. Light filtering through the blurred windows let them view the small interior at a glance. A square stove sat beside a basket holding firewood and 2 pieces of coal, near a single bed thick with dusty cobwebs. A sheet metal table at its foot, a wooden shelf with 2 tin cans, and other items in a narrow metal locker near the door. He said fire came first. As the cold kept slipping through his clothes, grabbing the matches, he headed to the stove, Hayasaka trailing close behind. Fire starting was not difficult, as he had lived in the countryside until he was 10. He checked the stove for blockages, grabbed a roll of newspaper from a broken shelf, crumpled them at the bottom, arranged twigs and stacked heavier wood on top, leaving gaps for airflow before striking a match. The paper caught at once and the sticks slowly flared. His old survival skills had not gone rusty. In the game, many skills maxed out at level 5, and his fire starting could easily pass for a level 3 or 4. Hayasaka praised him warmly, calling Russell Coon amazing, admitting that while she could bodyguard and hack, starting fires was not on her list. He rubbed his nose, giving a proud chuckle. Once the wood blackened and warmth finally touched his palms, he shivered, the bone-deep cold registering in his feet and calves. Their thin trousers had offered zero protection against the snow. From the knees down, they were soaked in ice water. He insisted they had to strip off the frozen layer, or their body temperatures would continue to plummet. She had already been wringing her pant legs, deeply relieved he had thought of it himself. She kicked off her shoes, peeled off her wet socks, and pointed her feet toward the stove, blushing as she praised Russell Coon's smart thinking while reminding him. He tried not to peek. Covering his mouth with a cough, he turned his head away. He had caught a glimpse but promised himself not to look again. She wrung out her wet pants. After rolling her pant legs up, Russell did the exact same thing since he lacked spares. He stood up, telling her to get warm while he searched the dark room. Gathering supplies was crucial in any survival game. Choosing the long dart first was a clue. It suggested a low difficulty setting, with no magic or advanced tech in a deserted modern town. Compared to sandbox games, where you started with absolutely nothing and had to rub sticks together to make fire, finding canned food and weapons was pretty easy. Finding thick clothing was the main priority, and his quick search yielded a great haul. He scored 2 heavy shirts, 2 pairs of thermal pants, and a thick, heavy parka. That high-tier jacket was a massive win. Sharing the clothes let them venture back outside. The spare thermal pants meant they could finally hang up their completely soaked clothes to dry. Sadly, there were no shoes, so Hayasaka AI had to stick with her wet leather ones. After changing, she sat by the stove, resting her cheek on her knee to rub her feet. She sighed, complaining softly that her poor feet had never faced such a miserable trial before. But she quickly smiled again, telling herself not to complain about their incredibly lucky haul. Warm clothes were a blessing. Russell blinked, deeply moved by her surprisingly sweet attitude. Even if she was just acting, her thoughtful, gentle behavior made him want to cry. He felt deeply touched. Russell reassured her that shoes would be easy to find here. He would search other houses later, so they should focus on checking their food supply first. She agreed happily and stood up to look at their piled-up loot. Examining a tin can, she read the label for pork and beans and smiled happily. Russell noted they only had 3 cans in total, 2 of pork and 1 of peaches. He then laid out their snacks, which included some beef jerky and 2 oat bars. Plus 2 sodas. She tapped her chin, recalling that their personal backpacks held extra food. Specifically 2 packs of biscuits and bottled water each, as she counted on her fingers. Rationed carefully, it was barely 4 meals, and she pouted, claiming she ate very little anyway. Russell countered that in this bitter cold, their bodies would burn energy much faster. Realistically, they only had 3 solid meals. She clapped her hands in agreement. She praised Russell Coons for his logic, keeping the mood light and encouraging. He suggested they deal with food shortages later and cook up a warm meal now. She happily volunteered to cook, which was honestly a massive relief for him. Russell's cooking was erratic, rivaling the Tatsuki Elite 10 or producing literal poison. He immediately began searching for pots and pans near the old fireplace. Usually abandoned houses with stoves spawned cookware, but she beat him to the search. She pointed to a narrow gap where he discovered a heavy cast iron skillet. It was wedged tight, pitch black, and heavy. He silently praised her sharp observation skills. She had not just been resting by the fire, she had been carefully analyzing the room. The pan was just dusty, so a quick clean would make it perfectly usable. Since her leather shoes were wet, he went outside to scrub the pan with fresh snow. She stepped up to button his parka, telling him not to wander too far into the cold. Her sudden closeness made his face flush red, forcing him to stare awkwardly at the ceiling. Talk about a complete change in attitude. Her playful smile vanished instantly. Her face grew cold as she muttered that the wish corridor was indeed real. She had stumbled upon something unbelievable, and if she could exploit this magic. Maybe this power could help Lady Kaguya, but she forced herself to focus on just staying alive. She felt lucky, her teammate was decent looking and actually had common sense. He was gentle, humble, and above all, highly capable of thinking. She stood barefoot, her shoes were still wet, but her feet were warm. She quickly began scavenging the corners of the cabin that Russell had completely missed. Unaware of the praise he had just earned, Russell stepped outside and wrapped his parka tighter. He took a deep, long breath. The sunny, windless day made the cold manageable. It was not as unbearable as he had feared, though his feet were freezing inside his thin sneakers. He spotted a nearby woodshed, a place that usually spawned fuel in the game. But stepping inside, he sighed with disappointment at finding only 2 pieces of dry firewood. Still, these large logs would burn for a long time, so he tucked them under his arms. He headed back, filled a pan with clean snow, and wiped it down with a rag. Clean as a whistle, he pushed the door open, and Hayasaka AI immediately welcomed him back inside. Shutting the door with his foot, he dropped the logs as she cheered at his success. She rattled the old wooden crate beside the stove, thrilled that they finally had fuel. Warm sleep tonight, that was her promise as she checked the clean pot. After rolling up her sleeves, she set the pot down and began inspecting their food pile. Russell suddenly noticed the old metal workbench. In the game, this was used for crafting. Now it was piled high with salvaged junk. Hayasaka AI caught him looking and smiled warmly. She playfully remarked that she could not just let Russell do all the hard work alone. While he was outside freezing, she had successfully scavenged every single corner of the room. Aside from food, she found some painkillers, a roll of bandages, and some disinfectant. She also grabbed a box of matches tucked inside a stack of old newspapers. Then came the real loot, rare items tucked deep into the dark corners. First was a pristine hunting knife in a leather sheath, its sharp blade gleaming brightly. Russell decided to give it to her, knowing her skills would make this weapon deadly. Next to the knife lay 2 golden rifle cartridges. Russell immediately looked up in surprise. The gun rack was empty. He cursed himself for forgetting to check it sooner. Nothing there, the safe that usually sat between the table and cabinet was gone. No safe here, a regular hunter's cabin apparently did not deserve one. That was realistic but disappointing. She asked if firearms might actually be around. He explained that rifles and revolvers usually appeared here, but their luck was bad. This house had a decent chance to spawn a rifle, but they got nothing. Russell could not help looking regretful. She picked up a can of pork and beans. With a mischievous smile, she argued that meeting someone as reliable as Russell was lucky. She is totally flirting, and honestly, can you blame her? Russell tries to stay focused. Anyone else would have been completely dazed by her charm, but he stayed focused. He noticed her brow was slightly furrowed and asked if she had a headache. Propping her face on one hand, she admitted she was struggling with something else. She had been carefully calculating their food situation, and the math was not good. They had walked incredibly far, and sleeping in a cold cabin required high calories. Eating too little would freeze them, but eating too much would leave them starving. He had been thinking the exact same thing. This cabin was a decent shelter. But long-term survival required hunting, so his plan was to move on tomorrow. She smiled. Where to? He suggested heading to the camp office next. One of the best spots on this map, maybe the whole game, a 2-story cabin. With better insulation, easier food, wild plants, endless cattails and rabbits. Plus ice fishing huts on the nearby lake. Her eyes lit up and she asked if they were leaving tomorrow. He nodded. Rest tonight, eat well tomorrow. Morning then set out. She was visibly relieved they only had to worry about dinner and breakfast. Next, she asked about the distance, route, and terrain, tapping her drying leather shoes, worrying if such footwear could handle the rough ground, and if wolves lurked. He scratched his head. Mystery Lake was his absolute favorite. Map. With their backs to the cabin, they would head right, crossing a snowy field to find the abandoned railroad, then follow the tracks directly to the camp office. Distance was the main issue. The game's protagonist could reach it in half a day, but that guy was a beast who survived a month on venison steaks, with only the occasional rose hip, gorging on pure protein with no carbs, hauling 30 kilograms. Through blizzards for hours, they simply could not compare to that, even. Hyacinth broke her character for a split second, her little face drooping as she complained about the game's unrealistic design, then reasoned that half a day of walking and resting in stages would still get them there before nightfall. He added that wolves might spawn on the big slope before the tracks and near the camp office, but compared to physical exhaustion, a few wolves were no big deal. Her manga-level combat skills meant she could easily stab wolves with a sharp branch, and he could probably club one or two with a sturdy stick once. Adrenaline kicked in. This was strictly one-on-one, though. Since against a pack, even she would lose her edge. She put on a cute, frightened act, calling wolves scary, but her eyes remained completely calm. Talk about a total act right. He saw his chance to break the ice, realizing they had never discussed anything substantial. Neither knew the other's special reward. In a pure survival game like this, sharing information made cooperating much, much easier. He fully trusted her intelligence to have already thought of this, simply waiting to see his move. So he took the initiative, treating her like a familiar anime character. He let his guard down completely. He pulled a heavy whistle from his collar and waved it, explaining this wonder could summon 2 Alaskan malamutes for an hour. Having 2 hunting dogs plus 2 people would easily scare off any average wolf pack. She gasped that he could summon dogs, calling it amazing, then cooperatively pulled a wooden box from her pack. It was finished in deep red lacquer with faint patterns of clovers and cherry blossoms shimmering softly in the firelight. She admitted her luck was not like his. She had also picked a wonder, but hers only brewed black tea. Sliding the lid open, she revealed a deep blue velvet lining holding a mini silver teapot, 2 small silver cups, and 2 small silver spoons, alongside 2 folded linen tea towels with delicate lace. She spread her hands, introducing it in a funny cartoon voice as an emergency teapot set. It generated hot black tea daily, boosting spirits and relieving fatigue, though the daily yield was only 300 milliliters, just 1 cup each. She looked away, slightly embarrassed by her weak reward, but he did not mind at all, staring at the teapot with an appreciative nod. A hot drink would provide crucial warmth, boost their spirits, and increase vital blood flow. It fights off fatigue, basically generating endless water. Even a simple bronze wonder has some seriously miraculous effects. He glances quietly at her pack. When they first opened it, there was nothing. She must have slipped the box in while changing. Unbelievable. Her agile hands sneaked that wooden box right in. He praises her quick thinking, and she sets the teapot down. She giggles and tells him to look forward to some tea. Knowing he can summon his beast makes her feel much more relieved. She stares at the canned pork, trying to figure out how to open it. He grabs his knife and pries it open since he has survival training. He knows survival rations well, unlike Kaguya's pampered elite maid. She asks if the camp office tomorrow will have enough food for them. He guarantees there will be more than twice what this cabin has. She just wants to plan portions, then she adjusts her imaginary glasses. In a cute, serious voice, she warns him not to underestimate her. She claims her nutritional knowledge is elite to keep her perfect figure. That figure is real, but she is hiding half the truth. Hayasaka AI is actually managing Kaguya's strict diet, not her own. In the original story, Kaguya's meals are strictly controlled. Any slight weight gain would bring complaints from her demanding brothers. So yeah, Hayasaka really is a certified professional in this area. He leaves the cooking to her, calling her the real expert. He carefully opens the can of meat and hands it over. She gives him a quick salute and carries it to the fire. Next, she asks for peaches. He grunts and keeps cutting cans. Honestly, who knew a maid could make canned food look so good? Instead of heating the can directly, she pours it into the pot. The broth sizzles on contact. She stirs it with a branch. Lentils and pork bubble. The savory sauce thickens over the fire. A delicious aroma fills the room. Out come the dry biscuits. Since their starter backpack came from reality, these are not saltines. They are small foil-wrapped squares of hard, dehydrated biscuits. Using a wooden stick, she crushes them right inside the foil. Then she pours the pieces in, pressing them into the broth. After letting it simmer on the fire for 3 minutes, she lifts the pot. She sets it down, one hand on her hip, she twirls her stick. She proudly names her creation braised meat and biscuit stew, which he loves. It is a fitting name. Lacking utensils, she taps her forehead. She grabs 2 tiny spoons that came with her magical teapot. They are fingernail-sized, but they will do. Next are the peaches. She places the peach slices on the foil, keeping the syrup. He watches closely, knowing she has a clever plan for that syrup. She giggles. It is their secret weapon for tomorrow's survival journey. She presses the sharp edges down safely and sets the can aside. Pouring the hot tea, she sits down, clasps her hands, and smiles. He scooped some from the pot. She claimed she had not shown her full skills yet, but it was barely edible. Though hungry, Russell did not rush, choosing to take a sip of tea first. Rich maltose aroma, full-bodied yet sweet and smooth, left a natural, lingering fragrance. He blinked. Since she possessed Irish blood and the beautiful teapot bore Irish symbols, the tea should have tasted like English breakfast, yet this was clearly a Chinese black tea. Russell made a very private mental note to stop questioning this wonder logic. He complimented the tea and reached for the braised biscuits. Canned food sold for long shelf life had to be edible, and heating it up made it much better. Lard mingled with lentils and spices into something fairly delicious, salty savor. Biscuit still slightly firm at the core, he gave a thumbs up. Hayasaka AI contribution was not huge, but since she often gave emotional value, he reciprocated. She beamed and stuffed down another spoonful. They ate in silence. Once her intense hunger was fully suppressed, she picked up her tea, sipped, and looked at him and watched closely. She had a question, sensing he was familiar with this wish. Corridor adapting incredibly fast while she was different and still did not feel this was real. While cooking, with the aroma drifting up, she had wondered whether she was dreaming and if the aroma was actually her family cooking back home. She was now fishing for information. Russell deliberated as a clever idea formed. He told her this was the first he had heard of the Wish Corridor, but he had read similar novels, usually about people pulled into a strange space to complete tasks. She raised her eyebrows and eagerly asked for more. Russell spent 5 minutes explaining infinite flow novels like a storyteller, she remarked, sighing while clutching her spoon, that going on adventures across horror movies and endless dangerous scenarios made this Wish Corridor feel like a pretty good place by comparison, since it gave them a wilderness survival game rather than a terrifying ghost movie and starter rewards. Russell felt the atmosphere was right and noted that the classic difference was that in those infinite flow spaces, status panels usually display basic attributes, while theirs only showed talents and skills. Quick-witted, she understood instantly. She figured Russell had deliberately steered the conversation to exchange information, judging he was not prying maliciously but trying to carefully align their abilities and adjust the plan. Since he had revealed his wonder first, it was her turn. She opened her panel on the left, matching his 3-dimensional model name and countdown. The talent and skill columns differed in quality. She also had 1 unawakened talent and 2 bronze talents: hardened heart bronze, a resilient heart capable of withstanding immense pressure and remaining calm unless shocked. She would never be easily defeated, but a soft side remained inside, seemingly longing for deep romantic feelings. Celtic mist, bronze, a hazy, calling from her Irish blood, sharpening her perception of nature and emotions of others. Emotions enhancing her spirituality, skills, silver tier. Of a multifaceted maid, years of extreme training giving her excellent fitness. Familiarity with most combat techniques and deep proficiency in some, top tier. Observation, information processing, maid skills, and role-playing, she. Decided some touching up was required, meaning sharing but not word for word, she told him since he had mentioned panels that they should exchange. She gave Celtic mist. She shared the details word for word, only hiding the romantic parts of hardened heart. It was just too embarrassing. She modified her skilled details even more. Revealing her true master maid abilities would have definitely raised too many suspicious questions. So she renamed the skill to Bronze Skilled Genius Gymnast, making up a fake story. She claimed she did gymnastics, then cut her tracking and observation abilities. Instead, she only claimed a flexible body and a few basic moves. Twirling her hair, she pretended to be confused about how gymnastics counted. Since she practiced with hoops and clubs, she asked why that was combat. If she could have, she would have hidden those combat skills completely. The real problem was that Russell had zero actual fighting power of his own. His instant reaction skill only gave a tiny survival boost with no offense. Because of this, she had to exaggerate her own combat strength just a bit. Otherwise, even a single wolf would make him panic and waste precious stamina on detours. And who knew how the corridor worked? Russell shrugged, keeping his suspicions private. He suspected she was hiding something, but he did not care. Then spoons clinked. Apologizing quickly, she looked into the pot. The sweet peach mush was gone. Sliding the foil over, she offered him some of the remaining fruit. With a quiet look, she asked if they should rest once full. Hearing that from a beautiful girl sparked a quick fantasy, but survival came first. Russell agreed they should rest, then looked toward their small pile of firewood. He added that they should take turns keeping the fire alive. Letting the warm cabin freeze for even a few hours meant serious trouble. She agreed, finishing the last of her tea with a nod. Her glistening pink lips parted as she asked how they should arrange it. She suggested he sleep first, but Russell waved it off and insisted she go. It was not just chivalry, he was thinking about his terrible sleep habits. As a seasoned shut-in, staying up until 4 a.m. was easy. But waking up in the dead of night, absolutely impossible for him. She did not argue, pulling her coat tight, she agreed to the plan. This setup actually worked out perfectly for her because of her schedule. As Kaguya Shinami's personal maid, she was used to waking up before dawn. Getting up at 4 a.m. was routine, so she took the late shift. Russell took the dirty frying pan outside to clean it with snow. Meanwhile, she began clearing away the thick dust and cobwebs from the bed. Outside, the sky was growing darker, and with no clocks, they guessed the time. Admiring the fading red sunset, Russell was suddenly interrupted by a wild sound. A sharp wolf howl echoed through the trees, followed quickly by another. He stayed calm, standing right next to the cabin. Nothing could hurt him. The eerie howls were still far away. Tomorrow they would face them. He shook the cold water from the pan, packed it with fresh snow, and headed back. Stepping inside, he saw Hayasaka kneeling on the wooden bed with her back turned. Hearing the door, she spun around with a flourish, holding her hands up. In her palms, she held 2 slightly flat, dark plastic bottles. Lamp oil bottles, excellent for keeping torches lit or using as lubricant. Russell stared at them, asking where she had found them. She points at the bed. She complains that she has no idea how people store things. Leaving messy lamp oil around, luckily it did not leak, he puts them on the workbench. She adjusts her clothes, stripping off her heavy coat and winter pants. Down to her thermals, then she lifts the dusty covers and crawls right in. She gestures toward her heavy parka piled on the sofa near the stove, telling him to wear it. The cold room is freezing, even with a fire. She strictly warns him to wake her up at shift change, no staying up. Her round blue eyes warn him that sleep loss delays their journey. She sweetly wishes him good night and closes her eyes. He places the frying pan on the stove. Letting a fire burn without doing any real work is wasteful. In-game, using fire for multiple tasks is basic. He fills a cast iron pot with snow to melt into drinking water, the perfect setup while keeping watch. Boiling while sleeping is too risky, but doing it while awake is fine. He adjusts the pan, then settles down onto the single, cold sofa. Pulling her heavy parka over himself, he rests his cold feet right on the stove. Warm at last, a long watch lies ahead. Sitting quietly for a few minutes, intense boredom hits him, hours used to pass easily back home with video games, but out here there is nothing. Fearing he might fall asleep, he slaps his cheeks. She had mentioned an unawakened talent, probably a standard issue, unique personal soul power. The effects are usually incredible, think cheat code level power, so he needs to unlock his. He opens his system panel. To his surprise, the translucent badge has completely changed. This specific badge looks completely different from the other ones. Instead of a hexagon, it is a circle split into 5 parts. 4 outer sectors surround a small, blank circle right in the center. 3 sectors are already glowing with azure, emerald green, and pinkish purple. He focuses and clicks. Nothing happens. It is still completely unawakened. Perhaps filling that final central circle is the key to unlocking it. He stares at the blue area, and a sudden scene flashes in. His mind, he is talking with Hayasaka AI, planning their journey, a recap. The emerald green sector shows them eating dinner. The pinkish purple is a montage of scenes. Hayasaka AI is flattering him with her sweet voice. Blue represents planning, green is food, and pink is her gentle charm. With only 3 fragments he can only guess, he closes the panel. He picks up an old newspaper, hoping to find some secret clues. Usually newspapers and survival stories carry vital background lore or useful tips. A supply depot marked somewhere on Great Bear Island would change everything. But unfortunately, there are no major secrets hidden here, only boring. Local news, a winter fishing tournament, or a bear delaying its hibernation. At least reading it helps pass the time in this freezing shelter. Suddenly, the pan starts gurgling. He looks up and takes it off the fire. Setting the boiling water on the table to cool down, he sits back down. Hayasaka AI, who had been half awake, closes her eyes once more. Sleeping in such a brutal place, she can only drift in semi-sleep. Rather than rest deeply, but it should still give her enough energy. In the middle of the night, Russell throws more wood on the fire. As he dozes, Hayasaka checks the survival countdown to keep track of time, something he completely forgot to do. Realizing she had been resting for nearly 4 hours, she decides it is time to get up. She rolls over, and the soft rustle of her clothes wakes Russell up. He sets aside his newspaper. Her face glows red under the warm firelight as she waves. With sleepy eyes letting him know she is awake, he realizes he forgot about the countdown timer and hesitantly admits he has no idea how long she slept. When he suggests she get more rest, she simply shakes her head, saying she is perfectly fine. Russell does not argue because he is exhausted, standing up in his parka. He watches her roll off the bed, still half asleep and bored by the newspapers. He slips off his warm coat and drapes it over her shoulders as she watches. He pulls it tight. She blinks in total confusion because his sudden boldness feels completely out of character, a total surprise, but fortunately, she stays calm, notices his exhausted eyes, and with a smile, grabs his wrist. She pulls him toward the bed, teasing that he looks ready to crash right there. Her voice snaps him out of it. Embarrassed, he scratches his cheek and sits down, taking off his shoes to crawl into bed, true to her anime aesthetic even after hours in the freezing snow and campfire smoke. Any stale cabin smell is completely gone, replaced by her sweet, clean scent. That gentle fragrance keeps him wide awake. Meanwhile, Hayasaka notices the exact same thing about his warm parka, a faint cedar scent. Just putting it on triggers a wild mental image of him, hugging her from behind. She shakes her head, hard. She pinches her cheek to snap out of it. Sure, she loves romance manga, and secretly dreams of love deep down in her heart. But she is not boy crazy, or is she? She actually almost pulls the collar up to sniff his scent. There is no way Russell has succubus powers, she thinks. Honestly, can you blame her? His passive charm is actually at work. Sitting down on the sofa, she instantly feels a massive shift from her usual routine. Usually she is running around instantly, with her feet barely touching the ground. Sitting here just to pass the time is entirely new. She quickly finds something to busy herself mapping out their next route, since Russell is sleeping. Soundly she grabs the tablecloth, measuring and cutting it with a hunting knife. Russell is the type who can sleep through a massive thunderstorm, and he rests for hours until a howling wind finally wakes him up. He stares at the glowing stove. Oh right, he got transmigrated. Meanwhile, Hayasaka is no longer on the couch. She stands leaning against the cabin's only window, looking through a glass covered in thick, dark grime. The house was clearly abandoned for years, or the last owner hated cleaning. She squints outside with her hands on the sill. Russell sits up and asks her what is happening. She turns around, slightly surprised to see him, and explains she heard a massive windstorm and wanted to check it out. But the filthy glass makes it impossible to see. He rolls out of bed, shivering instantly. Even with a fire, this cabin is no heated brick house. Walking closer to the window, the roaring wind grows incredibly loud. She whispers that the weather looks too dangerous to step outside, but he reassures her not to worry, explaining this wild storm should blow over pretty quickly. The weather was volatile, switching from a deadly blizzard to clear skies in just a few breaths. She pouted, hoping the storm stopped before their plans were ruined. Suddenly, she remembered something and pulled him over to a nearby table. Covered in survival gear, she picked up strips of cloth resembling bandages and explained they were makeshift leg wraps, since their thin shoes could not survive the deep snow. She then held up several plastic shopping bags she had found, explaining they would layer the wraps first, then the plastic, then socks and boots to keep their feet dry. Next, she pointed to two larger items he recognized as a tablecloth and window curtains, now modified with head holes and tightened sides. Since they lacked proper winter coats, she handmade these alternatives. These were Hayasaka's homemade ponchos, a classic style of traditional garment from the Americas, though he only recognized them from old cowboy movies. Her creations matched the most basic style, a square piece of fabric with a head hole. He stared at her with mild surprise, utterly impressed. He knew she was lethal in combat and decent at cooking, but tailoring was completely unexpected. She giggled, claiming she once joined the school handicrafts club, a highly convincing story, whether it was actually true or not. Either way, they now had warm clothes, and the wind outside finally died down. They decided to eat a quick breakfast before heading out into the cold. Breakfast was massive. They needed every single calorie for the frozen trek ahead. Along with standard pork and beans, Hayasaka pulled out beef jerky, pouring it right onto their clean biscuit foil. Next, she stirred sweet peach syrup into hot black tea. A massive sugar boost helps. While she cooked, he checked their pants, which had fully dried overnight. He then packed up their gear, carrying almost everything from the cabin and loading the heaviest items on himself. To keep her load light, talk about practical thinking, she was their primary fighter. A lighter backpack would let her perform. Before resting, he had debated carrying the heavy fuel canister, but looking at their campsite now, there was no need to hesitate. After keeping the fire burning all night, the cabin firewood and fuel were completely gone. He frowned, realizing how fast resources vanished here. He focused on food and gear, but fuel was an absolute survival priority. Her voice snapped him out of his deep thoughts. Breakfast was ready. It was simple food, the classic combination of canned pork and dry biscuits. Since he grew up in a northern region famous for beef jerky, he approved. The meat was heavily spiced, making even a toasted shoe sole taste incredible. They sat down to map out their journey in much more detail. Walking the entire distance without stopping was impossible, so he suggested a rest. Stop halfway, she agreed, noting their last two oat bars were perfect snacks. He peered outside. The breeze was light with no fresh snowfall, pleasant, really. But the blinding white glare stung his eyes, reminding him of another trick. He gathered several finger-thick twigs and piled them neatly on the wooden table. He calmly explained a technique he remembered from a winter wilderness survival show. Regarding emergency snowshoes, they bend flexible sticks, tying them into racket shapes, and strap them on to distribute weight, extremely helpful in deep, soft drifts. Sank past their shins. She watched him fumble around. He just could not seem to tie them. She burst out laughing and giggled that Russell Coons might know plenty, but his manual skills were poor. Miss Hayasaka would handle it. She tied them with leftover fabric strips from the leggings and cloaks. In just over 10 minutes, she had 2 pairs of emergency snowshoes. Not beautiful, but sturdy. He scratched his head, helpless. His combat skills could not match hers, and now his crafting could not either. He really had become the intelligence character. What he did not notice was that his survival skill display flickered. A small light of text popped up, telling him a crafting blueprint had been detected, and since it was non-game, it would not be recorded. He also found 2 strips of dark curtain fabric, holding one to his eyes and handing her the other. Walking in snow too long could cause snow blindness because of the vast white and until they found goggles, these strips would do. The snowshoes were from a show, but snow blindness was common. Knowledge since back where he came from, they wore sunglasses every winter. They spent over 10 minutes organizing clothing. He gave the parka to her, same. Logic as the lighter pack, since if a fight broke out, they relied entirely on her. For himself, he put on the tablecloth cloak. They checked packs and walked out. Cold air rushed into his lungs, but not freezing. He felt quite warm at least. For an hour or two, with no hypothermia, she took a deep breath, raised her hands. A cheer called it great weather, smiled bright, but her eyes remained cautious as she surveyed the surroundings. He told her with a smile that the wind earlier meant they still needed to move quickly. She gave a forehead salute, her face turning serious as Private Hayasaka announced she was following orders, her left foot. And the snowshoe took the first step. He moved too, walking ahead and observing. Carefully, the path he had chosen was safer, following the mountain wall down to the tracks, then the tracks to the camp office, both stretches with clear landmarks. He watched for wolves and natural resources, heavy giant branches. He ignored since a protagonist would need an axe to chop those small items. Could be picked up. She crouched beside him and asked whether the red things were wild berries and edible. He was at a low shrub with no leaves, about 20 or 30. Finger-sized red fruits. He told her rose hips, sour but good for vitamin C. And that canned food alone would not do. Today they had no time for pine needles. For needle tea, she said it was lucky to have him, then muttered that sour berries supplementing vitamins were similar to hawthorns, and maybe she could try them in cooking or even make jam. He looked forward to the jam and picked up speed. They gathered 40 to 50 berries, a handful's worth, she joked in a quirky voice. They were precious vitamins, clapped and stood. He was a bit regretful, since he had not found other valuable plants. The long dark had many old man's beard, lichen for disinfecting wounds, birch bark for restoring health, and tea. Another effect would not be lacking either, risey mushroom, in the game. Risey were like common mushrooms, several near a stump, easy to harvest. Then again were risey not just a type of mushroom, they crossed slopes in a sparse forest. As they tired, a slope appeared ahead, not steep but high. One or two semi-open train cars at the top filled with logs. Tracks meant they had all they could do was climb, but their joy faded. Two dark shadows sat on the slope. Russell pulled down his mask, squinted hard, and whispered a single word: wolves. These beasts were far from strong, skeletal, thin, and not threatening at all. He relaxed. She grabbed his arm, stammering that wolves were actually right there. He told her not to worry since the beasts hadn't noticed them, gently patting her hand. Then he reached for the dog-calling whistle, an item usable only once a day. With only 2 wolves, they could handle it without wasting such a precious resource. Better to save it. Besides, a direct fight was entirely avoidable. From their angle, the wolves were further down, sticking close to the right mountain wall. Knowing how game AI worked, they wouldn't be detected from this distance. If they could circle around the tracks, the predators wouldn't notice them at all. He whispered this plan, and she quickly agreed since the wolves looked so weak. Still, survival meant playing it safe, and she trusted Russell completely. Trusting Russell Khan's judgment, she clenched her little fists to cheer him on. She also suggested preparing for a fight, so he searched for weapons. He found 2 thick branches, each measuring about 1.5 meters long. His hunting knife was sharp but far too short, and range was everything. The makeshift spear felt a bit light, but it was the best he could find. Tucking the branches under his arms, he guided her toward the wall to climb. Thanks to their snowshoes, they could move incredibly fast and quiet through the snow. The wolves remained completely unaware, confirming Russell's theories about their game-like behavior. These predators had the exact same limited perception as the virtual game. They were basically deaf and blind, making them very easy to avoid. Evasion and hunting would be easy, she whispered to him in surprise. She admitted she never expected them to be this completely oblivious to their presence. Since she rarely played games, she asked if players complained about stupid AI. He replied that if she wanted true realism, she should try hardcore simulators. Those games had ultra-realistic animal senses. Hearing that, she admitted she preferred this. She hoped their next destination wasn't that brutal, preferring these dull, stupid beasts. Reaching the summit, her eyes went wide. Just as promised, a massive railway stretched ahead. Russell immediately searched for loot, finding only 2 stacks of old newspapers. After grabbing a can of soda, he stared at the massive logs piled nearby. If he could somehow haul this wood back to their shelter, they would be set. But without a proper sled, moving those heavy logs was completely out of the question. Turning around, he saw her kneeling to untie her snowshoes, noting the thin snow. She mentioned the snow was clearing up, prompting him to remove his own footwear. They shared a quick oatmeal bar, washed it down with soda, and took a short break. Leaning against the railcar, he stood with arms crossed, staring at the frozen wilderness. The sound of rushing water echoed, bringing a crucial piece of survival trivia to mind. In extreme cold, holding one's bladder drains crucial body heat. It rapidly lowers body temperature, making regular breaks a literal lifesaver. It is necessary even without the urge. Footsteps quietly approached. She clutched the edge of her cloak, her face flushing completely red. Biting her lip, she hesitantly asked if he had heard anything, causing him to blink. He pretended to have no idea, asking what sound she meant. His acting was flawless. He acted so convincing she couldn't tell he was lying. She turned away, whispering it was. For the best, since they had to keep moving, he breathed a quiet sigh of relief. After all, he suggested it. Still, he forgot how quiet and open this place actually was. Walking ahead of him, her deep blush simply wouldn't fade away. This time her embarrassment was real. No girl could stay totally calm after a moment like that. Luckily, a new problem suddenly distracted her. Immediately, their travel speed massively increased now. Walking right along the railway tracks was way faster and less tiring than struggling in those heavy snowshoes. The brutal grind ended. They walked easily. He smiled, saying they might reach the camp office early. Time passed. The sky turned gray and the light faded. Night was far off, yet the temperature suddenly plunged and they, especially him, felt a brutal, biting chill. They went completely silent, burying their faces. Looking up, he noticed the forest clearing as the sparse trees finally vanished. Rolling hills gave way to wide, descending slopes. His eyes lit up instantly. At the familiar paths, near the camp, the ground around the tracks became completely flat and clear, just as he was about to share the good news. Piercing wolf howl shattered the quiet. Fear hit him as three shadows scrambled. Up the left slope, three wolves. The leader looked massive, the others slightly smaller. He wondered if they were the same species as those scrawny beasts from earlier. His face fell. He cursed himself. He had forgotten one crucial thing. In this game, beasts were blind far away but up close. They could sniff you out instantly. Walking high on the tracks, they couldn't see down the steep slopes. The wolves had been right beneath them, caught their scent and immediately charged. Unfortunately, they had already thrown away their heavy wooden poles. To lighten their load, unarmed, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed his silver whistle and blew with all his might. The sound wasn't a sharp squeak, but a deep, echoing howl. Two massive, ghostly shapes leaped out, landing heavily in the snow. Two giant Alaskan malamutes appeared, one gray and white, the other pure black, brave and fierce. They stood tall, shielding the pair. They growled fiercely, baring their sharp teeth at the oncoming pack. According to real-world survival knowledge, two giant dogs and two humans should make any predator back off, but these virtual wolves had pure game programming, completely hyper-aggressive, charging on sight. Up close, even guns or fire wouldn't scare them. Talk about a nightmare scenario. The sudden defenders only made the wolves hesitate for a split second before they all lunged. The malamutes leaped forward to meet them. In motion, it was clear they were much smaller than the wild wolves. Sled dogs were built for pulling, not deadly combat. He knew instantly they wouldn't survive on their own. If those dogs died, they were as good as dead. He had to help, but she was faster. She snatched up two fist-sized stones, whipped her arm back, and let them fly. Like bullets, one grazed a wolf's back, while the other hit another gray wolf right on the snout. The injured beast howled, eyes flashing with absolute rage, and charged directly at her. Meanwhile, the other beast lunged right at him. The dogs were quickly pinned by the massive alpha. The size difference was completely devastating. The leader overpowered one dog instantly. The second dog bit the alpha just in time to save his teammate's life, but even together, they stood absolutely no chance to hold against the alpha. After blowing his whistle, he spots a wooden club nut far away, over a meter long and way thicker than the earlier branch. He snatches it up and swings at the wolf lunging toward her. As it passes right in front of him, despite his total lack of exercise, his youthful new body gives him an edge. The club strikes the wolf's front shoulder. The beast mid-sprint loses its footing, crashes into the snow, and kicks up a white mist, but this wild swing exposes his back to the other wolf. A normal person would react far too slowly, but his reflex talent boosts his Neural reflexes, a direct clash is too risky, so he goes for something else. Riding the swing's momentum, he rolls forward, not standard but agile. This clears his position so the wolf snaps at empty air. Now watch, she is even faster, though his sudden save catches her off guard. Her eyes sweep the ground, her right foot kicking up a fallen branch straight into her waiting hands. She grips the end, her waist end, hips twisting violently as her entire body unfurls like a loaded spring. The makeshift spear shoots forward like a dragon, aiming straight at the beast's head. This perfect mid-level thrust strikes the wolf right on its nose. The gray wolf, its nose badly injured a second time, lets out a sharp, agonizing whimper. As if electrocuted, its head jerks, stumbling blindly into the deep snow, before scrambling up to claw at its face, whimpering huge drops of blood staining the white snow crimson. Standing back up, he silently cheers her on, praying she keeps fighting for real instead of trying to play weak. His biggest worry was her playing dumb just to preserve her fake persona. But thankfully, she is finally unleashing her actual, terrifying power. Catching his eye, she blinks her big blue eyes as her warrior look melts right back into a flustered Jaru. She squeals in shock, claiming her spear club experience just helped her hit it by accident. He nods along instantly. Whatever she says, he is agreeing with, even if she claims she trained under legendary shadow masters, he would believe her. As long as she crushes these beasts, he is fine. She narrows her eyes, wondering if he is just humoring her, but she does not dwell on it. With the fight still raging, she focuses back on the pack. He grips his club tightly, closing his eyes to clear his blurry vision. Maybe the blinding snow is stinging his eyes, but a strange golden glow seemed to flash when he swung that club, yet it disappeared almost instantly. The two remaining wolves are back up, but in a terribly sorry state. The one he hit clearly has a broken leg, limping heavily. The other's snout is a bloody, mangled mess. It is a pretty terrifying sight. The injured beast shakes its head wildly. Growling through the pain, the two beasts stand side by side, pacing forward with extreme caution now, as the wolves watch them. She studies their movements, formulating a plan. She tells him her makeshift spear gives her more range. She will draw their focus to create an opening, allowing him to strike with everything he has. She finally trusts him now. His strength is pretty decent, and his reflex talent is incredibly reliable, allowing his body to keep up with his mind. Working together, taking down one wolf shouldn't be a problem. After he grunted in agreement, she held the stick out front. With him on her left, they moved forward in a V formation. Her stick tip stayed pointed right at the wolves' heads. He gripped his club like a baseball bat, ready for the clash. The limping wolf with clear eyes saw the threat and stayed calm. But the bloody-nosed one was blind with rage and in absolute agonizing pain. As their footsteps drew closer, the beast lost its patience and launched a quick test pounce. Fake or real, any movement was exactly what she wanted. Instead of backing down, she stepped right into the danger. With a swift flick of her wrist, she feinted a strike straight at the wolf's head, returning the favor, but with its eyes completely clouded, the beast couldn't tell. It instinctively tried to dodge, accidentally slamming hard into the limping wolf beside it. Normally, a little bump wouldn't matter, but this partner was already badly hurt. The sudden, sharp pain flared up immediately. The injured beast let out a painful howl and stumbled. Now watch, this was his perfect moment. Stepping forward, he gripped his staff with both hands and swung hard from the waist, delivering a devastating, full-power blow. The weapon connected solidly with the wolf's ribs with a sickening crack. The beast collapsed instantly, its limbs twitching. As pink foam leaked from its mouth, combat was pure, exhilarating adrenaline for him. That swing had shattered ribs, sending sharp bone fragments straight into its lungs. This wolf was done for. Seeing its companion down, the remaining bloody-eyed beast realized the fight was lost. The humans were completely untouched. It didn't hesitate, and honestly, can you blame it? Turning tail, it bolted, abandoning the struggle. Even the distant alpha, still fighting the sled dogs, gave a low howl and retreated. Exhausted, she leaned heavily on her staff, letting out a long, shaky breath. Still terrified, she asked him if they had really won. He nodded. His arm was cramping up, but he confirmed their total victory. She slumped in relief, admitting she had been scared to death. The two sled dogs ran over. Crouching down, she rubbed their heads and praised them. They happily wagged their tails, panting and incredibly loyal. Only minor scratches, nothing serious. She quietly wished they could keep raising them forever. Catching his breath, he walked back over to the dying wolf, gently reminding her that their temporary summon would only last for 1 hour. But novels suggested these wonders could be upgraded to make them permanent later on. He crouched down beside the wolf, in this game world harvesting. An animal usually yielded 4 key resources: fur, fresh meat, organs, and fat. However, eating carnivore meat carried a major parasite risk in this world. Predators also accumulated toxins as you moved higher up the food chain. Although wolves weren't at the very top, the system warnings were clear. Since they still had plenty of food left, he decided to ignore the meat. The other parts were highly useful. Dried internal organs were perfect for bows. And the thick wolf skin was the ultimate prize for keeping warm. But after such an intense struggle, he decided to hold off on skinning. He glanced over at her. She was still happily playing with the dogs. Walking over, he offered his hand and told her she must be exhausted. They needed to reach the camp office. She smiled, pulling herself up using his strength. She stopped to stand, asking if they were close. Russell pointed north, just 10 meters down the slope where she could finally see the cabin from the track. She puffed her cheeks, annoyed by the wolves hiding at their destination to ambush them. Just too mean. He clapped to grab the sled dog's attention, gesturing for them to drag the wolf by its front paws toward the camp office before other predators could ruin the fresh carcass. She watched, asking with worried eyes if he actually planned to eat the wolf. She knew all too well that the parasite risk in carnivores was incredibly high. But before she could offer advice, he explained he only wanted to skin it and use its organs. Hearing this, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief and dropped the subject. With no other beasts around, the final stretch was easy. After bypassing a small slope, she spotted the camp office. It was a 2-story wooden cabin with heavy snow on the roof, a flagpole flying the maple leaf flag, and a sign with the name and wild rose hips clustered nearby. He peered at a gentle slope right across from the office, noticing his fixed gaze. She looked but found nothing, poking him to ask what was up. He admitted with regret that in the game, this specific slope was a gathering spot for wild ptarmigans, valuable birds worth hunting for their meat broth and warm down feathers. But they were nowhere to be found. Luckily, those birds were always parasite-free, so they had nothing to worry about. Tilting her head, she asked if ptarmigans were basically just pheasants, imagining them as large, clucking wild chickens. With no ptarmigans in sight, he gently pulled her along toward the office, explaining that there were actually many different species of these wild birds. In fact, the local ones were usually no bigger than a typical pigeon. Blinking in surprise, she joked that he was basically a secret biologist, not just a tour guide. He coughed, telling her to stop teasing him. They finally reached the front porch. Standing close to the cabin, she was instantly drawn to the massive lake down the slope, which looked almost endless. Its icy surface a mix of light blue and white. She gasped at its size. He pointed out the faint, dark shapes on the ice, explaining they were fishing huts, a perfect source for long-term food. She asked if Russell actually knew how to fish, admitting she had no clue. Recalling his years of failed fishing trips, he sniffed and claimed anyone could catch a fish as long as they stayed patient. She nodded with a grin, guessing that Russell did not know how to fish either. After surviving that wolf fight, she was clearly opening up, joking around more. He felt she might soon reveal her true situation, shaking off the fishing joke. He quickly changed the subject. He told her not to underestimate this lake, calling it a goldmine for beginners. The thick rings of grass around the edge were cattails, a great source of food, plus deer often roamed nearby. Her eyes lit up at the mention of deer, realizing a single catch would solve their hunger issues for weeks. Easier said than done, though, because hunting deer with rocks is basically impossible. Throwing stones alone would do nothing, but with her and the dogs, maybe they stood a chance. They stood by the door chatting until a freezing gust made them shiver, laughing at how silly they were to stand out in the biting cold. But first he gestured for the dogs to drag the wolf to the large wooden fuel box out back. He lifted the heavy lid, and his eyes instantly lit up at what was inside. Around 10 pieces of coal and plenty of firewood, enough to burn for a long time. He shuffles them, stacking the wood over coal to clear space, then throws the dead wolf inside, letting the heat warm his hands before dealing with it. Now they can finally step inside. This camp office is much better maintained than Trapper's cabin, the door opening smoothly without that teeth-aching creak. Inside, the temperature feels significantly warmer despite the larger space, though. Maybe they had just been freezing outside for way too long. The first floor is messy. A single comfy sofa sits in the right corner, with small crates scattered around. Directly ahead and slightly to the right is an L-shaped wooden counter where she curiously fiddles with an old radio. Behind it, shelves and a workbench stand waiting. In the middle is an iron stove with a chimney. Reaching the roof, thicker than the trapper's stove but smaller overall, the left has joint counters and a winding staircase in the corner. She remarks that there are so many supplies here, she can see tons of food, tools, and books. He tells her to start the most exciting part of survival and loot this entire first floor. He rubs his hands, sheds his heavy backpack, and begins scavenging. He takes the left side with the joint counters, knowing this is where the food usually hides. First, he taps the laptops on the desk, black screens, dead due to magnetic fields. They only function during aurora nights when the screens light up. A pity, since they could have passed the time, but he has to focus on actual supplies. Under the stairs, he spots 2 large burlap sacks. He unties the knots. Perfect. Over a dozen potatoes and carrots wait inside. The carrots are slightly wrinkled and some potatoes have sprouted, but there is no obvious rot. As an old northerner, he knows these well. Just cut out the sprouted parts and they are perfectly edible. In this frozen wasteland, leafy greens are impossible, making these extremely precious vegetables. Beside the sacks lies a heavy, grease-proof paper bag. Its opening is sealed with bright yellow text. He picks it up to estimate about 2 or 3 kilograms, a bag of flour, the ultimate classic staple. There are also quite a few canned goods, like peaches and pork, and beans, plus 2 cans of tomato soup to use as great seasoning. Rather than just eating them plain, in the nooks he finds granola bars, chocolate chips, 2 boxes of crispy saltine crackers, and a small bag of beef jerky. There are also several cans of soda. Sandwiched between the counters, a tin container serves as a great hiding spot. He pulls out herbal tea bags. Only 5 left, but still fresh, a rich fragrance wafting out. Next, a coffee tin, barely used and also fresh. At the top of the cabinet, he finds a container of rolled oats weighing nearly 1 kilogram. This stockpile is incredibly abundant compared to the trapper's home. He also finds some cooking oil and a glass jar of salt near the stove. By now, she has wandered over, staring at the massive pile of food with absolute delight and surprise. He asks how her scavenging went, and her haul is pretty massive too. She found 2 whetstones, a small hatchet for firewood, some lamp oil, and standard medicine like disinfectant and painkillers. Best of all, she hands him a can opener, smiling as she says he won't need that knife anymore. The item in her hand is a coiled line with a hook, easily the most important thing. She admits that despite having 0 fishing experience, she knows exactly what it is. A simple line and hook, meaning she will be counting entirely on his performance later. He smacks his lips, takes the hook, and places it right on the counter. Is fishing really that hard? This isn't the real world anyway, in the long dark. There is no such thing as going home empty-handed, only a matter of patience. No rush for the second floor after facing freezing snow and 3 wolves. Hunting for supplies has left both of them completely famished. She taps her chin and ponders. Their stockpile is decent enough, and since Cappadocia owns the game caught, rabbits are near. With fishing and cattails ahead, they do not have to be stingy with food. They can afford a lavish meal, and he refuses to let her do all the work. Even if his cooking is absolute garbage, he can at least peel a few potatoes. She reaches for a flour bag, grabs a can, and suggests mixing staples with canned food. They can make a delicious flatbread to go along with their canned stew. He grabs some potatoes and carrots, standing by the stove to peel them. As his hands work, his mind wanders. He will eat his fill today and organize the second floor before resting. Tomorrow he can head toward Mysterious Lake to try ice fishing or catch some rabbits. But wait, what was that golden light flashing in his vision during the fight? The only thing linked to these mysterious events is his status panel. He subconsciously opens it to scan the interface. There is the familiar bronze badge. His awakening talent is still rotating through different colors. Wait, 5 colors. His eyes widen. There were only 3 before he fell asleep. When did it change? Hold on, aren't there exactly 5 sections on that badge? Does this mean his talent has finished awakening? He focuses on the badge. The 5 sectors are completely filled: deep blue, crimson, emerald green, and purple. The colors swirl around the edges, with a center of brilliant, rich gold. The system claims being chosen by the 5 gods is an exclusive, unique honor. He is watched by the gods of humanity: wisdom, courage, life, and charm. Every single action he takes will receive their absolute attention. His expression freezes. Which five gods are these? Is this some Warhammer crossover? Getting hit by a car and dying didn't make him panic. It was fine. Being dragged into a wish corridor modeled after some god space, still no panic. Even being thrown into a frozen, snow-covered wasteland, he kept his composure. But realizing he is watched by the chaos gods and the emperor of mankind, that is when a genuine, cold flicker of raw panic runs straight through him. Once those ancient entities fix their gaze on someone, dying becomes the easy part. Even after death, the soul and body get toyed with until they completely collapse. He mutters to himself, wondering if he can just return this exclusive talent. He would give it up entirely if it meant escaping their terrifying gaze. Mid-mutter, he notices something different. Unlike his other talents, this badge has a small, circled question mark sitting right in the top corner. It is the classic icon any gamer recognizes as detailed developer notes. He focuses his attention on it, and a wall of text surfaces in his mind. The very first sentence makes him exhale in relief, stating these gods are positive-natured. They are safe copies of the Warhammer Pantheon, meaning they won't destroy him. Harm their owner and had no independent mind, feeling reassured he. Read on casually, this talent did not make him an unbeatable powerhouse. It functioned more like an extra loot and item drop system, as long as he did things that pleased the five gods, he would catch their eye. The more he pleased them, the more rewards he got: basic gear, high-quality supplies, skills, and rare wonders. How did he know what counted? He just had to look back at what he did when unlocking it. The god of courage loved a good, bloody fight, while the god of humanity favored people helping each other. That made him think, where was the shop? A divine space like this should have one, but he saw nothing. Maybe players ran their own street and traded directly with each other. Still, there had to be a way to acquire gear. Or perhaps those sweet rewards only came after he completely cleared the entire world stage. Either way, his exclusive talent was incredibly useful for staying alive in this world. Fighting, helping others, and planning ahead were all vital. Getting paid extra just for staying alive, that was pure profit. But earning the favor of 5 different gods would not happen overnight, so he set it aside back to peeling potatoes, with 5 potatoes and 5 carrots cleaned. He chopped half into shreds and half into chunks. Fortunately, Hisako had already finished her own kitchen prep work by then, as she was scrubbing the bowls and a new frying pan with fresh snow. She asked him to start a fire so she could boil some water and clean everything. Next, she mixed flour and oats 3-to-1 and added his shredded vegetables and salt into a nice batter. 2 frying pans went to work. One heated oil for the vegetable chunks until they charred. Then she threw in canned pork, lentils, and tomato soup. The other pan waited for pancakes. She stirred the food slowly. With a small spatula to prevent the bottom from burning, he watched and cheered her. Honestly, he is completely useless at cooking, so he headed outside instead. He returned soon with a hand full of dry twigs, shaking snow off his messy hair. She stopped what she was doing and asked if it was snowing. He set the twigs down beside the sofa, telling her it was just a light flurry. Traveling in this weather would have shredded their clothing. She patted her chest in relief, which made him smile secretly. In the original story, that simple gesture would usually stir up some serious, bouncy waves. But there was nothing to see today. She had removed her padding for absolute safety before they stepped into the dangerous wish corridor. Ignoring his weird expression, she brought both of the hot pots to the kitchen counter. She happily noted the cabin was spacious, warm, and well-stocked. But with no dining table, they would have to eat standing up. He handed her a pair of chopsticks he had whittled on the spot from branches. She beamed at his thoughtfulness and eagerly took a bite. The pancake was perfect, with an incredibly crispy crust. With oats and 2 kinds of vegetables, the inside was soft. The stew loses its sticky flour texture, the oats adding a grainy bite. Tasting soft and sweet, he scoops out a fragrant potato first. The rich tomato broth carries a salty pork flavor, chopsticks at her lips. She warns him not to just eat the potatoes, recommending the broth. He tries it and finds savory, minced pork mixed with a chewy ingredient. When he asks about it, she laughs and admits it is beef jerky. Shoving down 2 more spoonfuls, he loves the flavor. Her smile grows. They tear through the food like a whirlwind, washing it down with water. Leaning against the counter, he sighs that he is full. She offers cleanup. She tells him to relax. He stretches out, total bliss. Since it is still early, he decides to handle the dead wolf outside. Watching him grab the hunting knife, she stands to help, but he refuses. With only one weapon, she cannot do much, so he suggests organizing upstairs. He wants her to check the second floor and sort the supplies. She nods, ponytail bobbing. Return the second you feel cold, she warns. Throwing on his heavy parka and a cloak, he steps outside with the blade. Butchering the wolf inside would leave a terrible, bloody stench. Best work outside. His two summoned sled dogs follow close behind, their timer ticking down fast. Sprinting around the camp office, they check the perimeter for hidden threats. Finding nothing, they run back wagging their tails. Poof, gone like bubbles. Walking over to the fuel box, he lifts the lid and drags it out. In less than an hour, the freezing cold has turned the carcass stiff. Staring at the beast, he has no idea where to start, absolutely clueless. His only relevant memory is holding down a pig during celebrations back home. Telling himself that skinning is skinning, he squats down to get to work. Pressing the sharp tip in, he lines up the blade against its belly. The moment it breaks skin, a familiar digital light flashes before his eyes. Opening his system screen, he notices a flashing icon on his skill bar. The lone bronze skill on his panel is blinking. The system alerts him. It identifies a game skill called Carcass Collection, asking him to record it. Raising an eyebrow, he realizes this harvesting ability is straight from his games. This means his survival expert talent is far from useless after all. As long as an action matches a game mechanic, the system can record. Unsure of what recording actually does, he decides to confirm it anyway. Instantly, the 0 out of 5 capacity on his profile jumps to 3. A new system notification pops up, explaining how this special talent works. His survival expert ability can actively detect skills and blueprints from this world. To unlock a skill, he simply has to perform actions that match it. For blueprints, he must touch raw materials or witness them being crafted. Once the system detects either one, he can choose to load them directly. The total limit is 5 points. Loading a skill costs him 3. The blueprint costs only 1. Studying these loaded skills allows him to master them. Through constant practice, research, or repeated crafting, they can become permanent abilities. This means they will eventually be extracted, no longer occupying his limited points. He nods. Now it all makes sense. The limit exists for a reason. 5 points, he perfectly tuned things to hold just 1 skill and 2 blueprints. Since equipping 2 skills would cost 6, he smacked his lips with slight regret. Because there were several skills he really wanted. First, those 3 combat skills of rifle shooting, revolver shooting, and archery, then resource. Ones like the Carcass Collection he just claimed, or the ice fishing he had not even encountered yet. Swapping skills was allowed, like trading Carcass Collection out for ice fishing later on, but doing so would reset his progress. He would have to start entirely from scratch next time. Still, he felt pretty relaxed, since his survival expert ability was already quite powerful. 1 slot was plenty. Rubbing his palms together, he gripped his hunting knife and activated Carcass Collection to test the ability out. Instantly, his entire body moved like a machine, peeling back the wolf's skin. Piece by piece, with sheer expert precision, night deepened as the wind picked up. But his warm parka kept him safe. Plus, he could easily cancel the automated action whenever he wanted. An hour passed in the freezing cold. Before he snapped out of it, hands dripping red, he held the freshly harvested wolf pelt, flawless from nose to tail. It looked incredibly neat, making him stare and wonder. Honestly, can you even blame him for keeping it? He would master Carcass Collection until it became a permanent talent. After all, he could use simple traps if he lacked actual weapon techniques. Besides, that ice fishing ability sounded like it might only work in freezing environments, while harvesting meat and hides was extremely useful absolutely anywhere. Without this magic system, getting a decent pelt would have been a nightmare. He laid the pelt down, shook his hands out, and prepared himself. The bitter chill was creeping in, but he still had a good 10 or 20 minutes left in him. He activated Carcass Collection once more. Practice really does make perfect. With 1 round done, the second round went much smoother. He slipped back into that autopilot state, quickly dismantling the frozen organs despite his stiff fingers. Next, he focused on the intestines. The system worked like magic, instantly deleting any waste inside the guts. Out came a completely clean, intact intestine, but the wolf meat itself was a different story since his cooking skill was not high enough yet. Parasites were a huge risk. Eating it was out, but the raw meat could still make great trap bait. By now, the sky was pitch black, and the temperature plummeted. Suddenly, the back door of the office slammed open. Hayasaka AI poked her head out, calling for him to get inside. She said the rest could wait until morning. Since he was sensible, he complied, especially since his heavy parka was finally starting to fail. Standing up, he grabbed the wolf, spotted a nearby dead tree, and after a couple of tries, managed to hang the carcass from a high branch. He could reach it, but other wild beasts could not. Inside, AI gasped at the flawless pelt, asking if he had truly skinned it so cleanly. She was genuinely amazed. He did not hide the truth from her, since she already knew about his innate abilities. He explained, making her look envious. Her own talents were great, but his were just far more practical. He tosses the pelt and organs aside. Standard game logic applies here. They dry on their own, just leave them indoors to dry for a while. Realistically, dried fur turns into a stiff, useless board, a total mess. But since skinning used a game skill, maybe some tanning magic is included. Even if it did not, a stiff mat is fine. He is not sewing it. His plan: save materials, find a workbench, and let the system handle it. He wants that crazy state of automatic crafting to take over again. That way, his master survival skills automatically make all their winter gear. Hayasaka AI tries hard to remember how to tan leather. No luck. She nods along, letting the system handle the hard work is definitely best. Since her tailoring skill lags far behind her cooking and combat, she is pretty clueless. Even with the pelt ready, she can only trim the edges slightly. So trusting his survival skill is much smarter. They head upstairs together. He asks about her finds, eyeing the cute beanie now sitting on her head. She says the upstairs is packed, then suddenly remembers something very important. She grabs his wrist. Quickly, she drags him forward to show him. The upstairs corridor is pretty wide, measuring about 1.5 meters. Cabinets line both sides, absolutely stuffed to the brim with various books. In game, these were just fire starters. Here, they have actual text inside. Novels, essays, and even poetry. He leans on the rail to look down. He gets a perfect panoramic view. Past the hallway lies the main room. It is half the downstairs size, completely dominated by 2 massive bunk beds. She proudly puts her hands on her hips, showing off the clean space. These beds are way cleaner than the trapper's place. No weird smell either. Just a bit of dust, which she already swept. He praises her efforts. A small stove sits between the beds, with a desk in the corner. Scavenged supplies are piled neatly, with plenty of clothes laid on the bed. He spots several pairs of thick pants, warm shirts, and a windbreaker. Underneath the desk, 2 pairs of boots are waiting. One is heavy-duty. The other is plain rubber. Before he can celebrate finding shoes, she acts. She snatches an orange book from the desk and shoves it forward. The second his fingers touch the cover, his vision flickers with a prompt. The system detects an actual, in-game skill book right in his hands. It is Wilderness Cuisine Volume 1, asking if he wants the skill. He instantly recognizes the name, and yep, game logic is saving the day. Reading boosted skills in the original game, and it works here too. She watches him with bright, excited eyes, explaining other books did nothing. Only this specific manual triggered a system prompt when she touched it. He hesitates, then pushes the book back to her, asking what her screen showed. She reads her screen aloud. It simply detected a skill book for her, asking if she wanted to consume it, just to increase her experience points. He laughs. His own system offered to let him learn it instantly. Crossing his arms, he points out that her cooking is already strong, while his is terrible, meaning the system is giving them custom options. In his opinion, she should definitely keep it, since she is already the chief chef. His reasoning was pretty simple. If he used the skill book himself, he might only get some basic bronze tier skill, limited to in-game recipes and simple Western meals. She had no cooking skill panel yet, but she possessed real, practical talent. Giving her the book would likely produce a much more useful, practical skill. It wasn't a vital skill, so giving it away cost him almost nothing, especially since he could max out carcass collection and grab a survival skill later. She teased him with a smile, calling his logic the ultimate min-maxer mindset. Then a sudden serious look. She firmly gripped the book and accepted it. She announced she would not stand on ceremony, and he told her to go ahead. The book dissolved into light as she gently closed her eyes to activate it. A A few seconds later, she blinked them open, her unfocused gaze scanning her menu. With a look of pleasant surprise, she revealed that the skill was pretty good. As she described it, he realized his guess was spot on, her talent had enhanced it. The combination worked, it had created a far more complete and powerful ability. This skill was called Wilderness Gourmet at Bronze, with quite interesting flavor text. It noted that in a modern kitchen, she would just be an excellent chef. But out in the wild, almost all other chefs would look like mere amateurs. She could skillfully use natural ingredients gathered outdoors to unleash their full flavor. And sometimes she might even discover recipes with very peculiar effects. This skill perfectly fit their situation, letting her make use of wild ingredients. She could even cook meals with powerful, game-changing survival buffs. But here is the catch: they had already eaten way too much today. So she sighed, promising to put 120% into breakfast. He cheered her on while hunting down an iron drawer to use as a container, carefully raking up the dying embers and glowing coal from the downstairs stove. He transferred them to the upstairs stove while she stood near the bunks. She gestured toward them, pointing out that 2 of the beds were completely ruined. 2 beds were ruined, so they would double up bedding on the lower bunks. He quickly agreed with the plan and started hauling the heavy blankets over. Though privately he thought pushing the beds together for body heat was even better. But when his inner voice accused him of lusting after Hayasaka AI, he protested that in a freezing place like this, any warmth was precious. In extreme cold, huddling up is just basic, logical survival strategy. Shaking his head to clear those wild thoughts, he went back to hauling blankets. While they worked, they mapped out their plan for the next morning. She pointed out that their food reserves would only last about 5 days. They needed more food, which reminded him of an old online survival theory. In a brutal world like this, the goal is always incredibly simple. Survive, you just need those 2,000 daily calories to keep going. Houses, skills, hunting, it all always comes back to food. He sat down on the freshly made bed, counting their potential options. In this survival game, food mainly came from 3 distinct sources: searching, hunting, and gathering, and each method had its own set of pros and cons. Luckily, their current area allowed them to try all 3 at once. His plan was to head toward the mysterious Lake tomorrow for a start. He planned to try ice fishing, gather some cattails, and head further out. A row of abandoned houses was waiting over there. Hayasaka AI nodded. She trusted his judgment completely. If a plan had no flaws, she followed. They quickly sorted out the tools, survival gear, and rations they would carry. With their route locked in, she suddenly yawned, rubbing her tired eyes. It was contagious. He yawned right back and decided to call it a night. He told her they had planned enough. It was time to sleep. She wished him sweet dreams, playfully keeping up her trendy gal persona. She kicked off her shoes boldly, slipping straight under the thick quilt. She gave him a cute wave before tucking her hand back under the warm blanket. Since the camp office stayed warm and cozy, they skipped the night watch entirely. While he slept, a strange system notification drifted slowly across his mind. Not exactly a stellar start. He failed to impress the 5 gods today. The next morning, bright light came through the glass to fall on his face. He opened his eyes slowly, realizing their smart bedding plan from last night had worked perfectly. He could feel heat trapped beneath the blankets, even though the stove fire was dead. The fire was long gone, but he muttered happily that it stayed warm enough. With a warm night guaranteed, he felt relaxed and rolled off the bed. Lying in bed doing absolutely nothing here was incredibly boring, so he rolled right up. At home, he could play on his phone, but here, he had nothing. Standing up, he noticed that Hayasaka AI had already emptied her bed. She was an early riser, he muttered, wondering where she could have gone. Assuming she was downstairs, he walked over and rested his hand on the railing. Leaning over the corner of the steps, he quietly watched her working below. Hayasaka AI was busy at the stove, stripped down to a thick shirt. Even in her rugged wilderness cargo pants, her youthful charm shone right through. He took a slow breath, feeling a strange sensation creep over him. Watching her cook breakfast felt dangerously close to domestic, newlywed bliss. He quickly pushed the silly fantasy aside and walked down the final steps. She turned around and waved with exaggerated surprise as his feet hit the floor. She teased him about waking up early, though he knew she heard him coming. He nodded, walking past her to examine the wooden shelves behind the counter. She had already organized all their scavenged wilderness gear into neat, tidy rows. He reached up to grab a small bottle of lamp oil and some rags. Watching him gather the items, she called out from the stove to ask his plans. He explained that he was building a couple of torches using wooden sticks. These were the dry branches he had collected near the entrance yesterday. They should make it back before sunset, but they needed insurance just in case. Without any storm lanterns or flares, making their own light was the only option. As his hands settled on the rags, sticks, and oil, a notification popped up. The interface pinged, announcing that it had detected a crafting recipe for a torch. It asked him if he wanted to save the blueprint. He quickly accepted. After all, a basic torch was survival 101 in the frozen wilds. Of course, his system-assisted survival skills would easily master this simple trick. It was barely crafting, just wrapping an oil-soaked rag tightly around wood. Wrapped around the end of a stick, and any beginner could easily replicate it after a single verbal walkthrough. Still, he trusts blueprints. Hand-rolled ones just cannot compare. Under Hayasaka-I's surprised gaze, auto-crafting takes over. Strips are soaked. And bound tightly around two joined sticks, it starts looking both sturdy and presentable. He finishes quickly, hefting one with a grin. He takes a few practice swings. The air whistles, satisfied it could easily double. As a solid melee weapon, he notes that with the head lit, a quick poke to a wolf's nose would send any pack howling away. His efficient crafting puts envy back into Hayasaka-I's eyes, and they settle into a simple breakfast of oatmeal chocolate bars and a can of sardines they pulled from the second floor yesterday. While eating, he realizes the food is decent, but no better than yesterday, making him wonder for a moment if his wilderness gourmet skill was earned for nothing until he remembers the description specifies natural ingredients: factory oatmeal, plastic wrapped chocolate, and canned sardines. Obviously fail that test, leaving the skill with nothing to trigger. Even so, hot oatmeal in this frozen wilderness is more than enough, though he cannot help thinking the sardines fall far short of the dace and salted black beans he remembers from before. Now Hayasaka-AI finishes her bowl and notes, a little helplessly, that a frying pan is fine for stir-frying but useless for stews or porridge, so he tells her the game actually features a larger cast-iron pot, perfect for stews and boiling water. Its drop rate should actually be higher than the frying pan, meaning they will likely find one across the lake today. They split the salvaged clothing layers. He takes the parka and the work boots, while Hayasaka-AI gets the rubber boots and the medium-length windbreaker. His outfit is thicker and heavier, while her windbreaker resists the biting wind and traps heat well enough that with proper layers underneath, she will not feel much colder than him, and her lighter setup also lets her move more freely. The deciding factor is really that the rubber boots fit her feet better. They run through their load: a hunting knife and axe, emergency rations, fish hooks, and line, wolf meat and liver for bait, and the torches strapped to their packs. Everything is ready. Hayasaka-AI pats her cheeks at the door and announces they are off. A warm cabin and plenty of short-term supplies make the mood far lighter than yesterday morning's frantic rush from the trapper's cabin to the camp office. Outside, Hayasaka-AI looks up at the slope where he told her a flock of Cappadocia gamecocks might gather, but the place is still completely silent. She sighs about how she had been looking forward to tasting some, then shakes the disappointment off and trots happily toward the wide, frozen lake. Her new rubber boots insulate much better and grip harder than her old leather shoes, even bouncing across the ice. She keeps her balance perfectly. It is half play, half careful adaptation to make sure her footwork will hold up in future combat. Standing at Mysterious Lake, he looks across a surface far vaster than its in-game version, an undulating sheet of milky frosted glass stretching toward a horizon where, if he squints, he can just barely make out the dark dots of houses on the far shore, with a scatter of small ice fishing huts dotting the frozen lake. But then Hayasaka-AI breaks his focus, yelling out that sausages are growing. Standing in the snow, waving excitedly at dense, rod-shaped plants along the shore with dark brown spike tips that look almost exactly like sausages, he walks over with a smile, explaining these are the cattails he mentioned, a classic game item, low in calories but easy and abundant to harvest, and incredibly useful as tinder, though tinder isn't a pressing concern given the massive stack of newspapers back at the camp office. Hayasaka-AI squats down in front of them and pokes one curiously, asking which part is edible since the sausage-like tip clearly doesn't look like food. The question stumps him completely because in the game, a player simply holds down a button to harvest a Cattails stalk without specifying the exact physical section. He admits as much, and she says cheerfully that just knowing there is an edible part is enough. They can experiment, and she asks if he can at least describe the shape. He tells her it is a long white strip resembling a smoother, tender bamboo shoot, and she snaps her fingers, saying they will simply dig up a whole one, break it apart, and find the matching piece. The logic is sound, so he stops worrying and says they can return to the lake shore for cattails whenever they have time. For now, they keep moving, and she pulls him along with big strides. They aim for the nearest ice fishing hut, only 100 meters or so off. Even on uneven ice, the walk is short. As the hut comes into sight, Hayasaka's eyes narrow and her body freezes. When he follows her pointed finger, he sees a few gray dots pacing back and forth in a loose ring. 200 or 300 meters off, keeping a measured distance. Yes, wolves, he admits he forgot to mention earlier that wolves roam Mysterious Lake, and Hayasaka teases that even he can be careless sometimes, then notes that at this range they should not be a problem. She doesn't say aloud what both already know. Yesterday, they and the dogs handled 3 wolves unharmed, dropping one outright, so a prepared fight today would be even easier. He adds that the ice fishing hut is right there as a fallback if things get ugly, turning away from the wolves, knowing that without a pack full of fresh meat and an upwind position, they cannot pick up their scent. Inside, the hut matches the game exactly, a tiny room with a round heating stove, a side row of small cabinets, and a nailed-wall cargo rack. Most importantly, a circular hole is cut into the wooden floor in the corner. There is just enough space for one person to work comfortably. With both of them inside, it feels quite cramped. Hayasaka spots a can of sardines on the cargo rack and digs through the boxes and cabinets, turning up another candy bar and oat bar, 3 or 4 fishing lines, 2 hooks in the drawer and tucked into the crevice between 2 cabinets, 4 revolver cartridges. Jackpot. After the sweep, Hayasaka squats by the round hole and pokes the surface, which has long since refrozen. Asking what they do about it, he tells her the game lets players break the seal with a hunting knife, hatchet, pry bar, or hammer. She eyes the sickle at her waist and his hatchet, doubting the knife will cut it, guessing it will take time even with the axe. He tells her they must try, since fishing is non-negotiable as a long-term food source. He unhooks his hatchet and brings it down hard. Ice chips spray across the floor, and although the refrozen plug is on a different scale from the older lake ice, it takes quite a bit of hacking before he breaks a sweat. Then the axe swings. It breaks into open water. The tool almost slips, making Hayasaka's eyes light up. He pulls back his freezing, dripping hand, but she is already prepared. She pulls a cloth from her pack so he can dry off his hands, and then the hatchet. He handles the little axe far more carefully than his own freezing skin. That small weapon is precious, and any rust would ruin everything. While he fusses, Hayasaka threads wolf liver and meat onto a hook, muttering quietly. She wonders if meat will interest fish, since they usually eat bugs. It should work. Once his axe is dry, he drags over some wood. They are piled in the corner, almost certainly left behind by some previous survivor. While she baits her hook, he ties the fishing line to a heavy stick. He knots it as tightly as possible. In the game, characters just hold the line. But bare hands on animal gut could easily slice flesh down to the bone. A crude rod is safer. He has fished before, but never through ice. Together, they drop their lines into a tiny hole where casting is completely impossible. After a few long, quiet minutes, Hayasaka starts to feel the chill. It is not dangerous yet, but it is enough to freeze her fingertips. She remarks that the indoor stove is an absolute lifesaver. Without it, they would freeze. He agrees, saying fishermen always need wood first. Squatting gets tiring, and the frozen ground is too cold for sitting. He makes a mental note that they will definitely need some small stools next time. The waiting drags on. He suggests bringing books or handicrafts next time. Sadly, the fast-forward button from the video game does not exist here. Still, having 2 people makes it bearable, and they can at least talk to pass the time. Maybe it is the heavy silence, but Hayasaka is unusually talkative. She opens up about almost everything, keeping only her deepest secrets hidden. Especially her real role as the personal attendant to Kaguya Shinomiya. This open attitude surprises him, considering they have only known each other 2 days. He begins to wonder, does he have some kind of hidden charm working here? His invisible affinity seems to be whispering to her. He matches her honesty, opening up in return about how he ended up here. Unlike her, he did not get a wish. He was run over by a car. She feels terrible for him, but he shrugs, saying he does not dwell on it. Clearing 10 worlds should bring him back to life anyway. She promises to do her part, but the wooden stick in her hand suddenly dips. The sharp pull cuts her off. She yanks the stick up, her face bright with shock. She gasps that she caught something, making his eye twitch in mild disbelief. Of course she gets the bite first. Talk about absolute beginner's luck. They use the same hole, hooks, and bait, yet she gets the catch. He warns her to take it slow, as the gut line is much weaker than nylon. One sharp yank in this brutal cold, and the line will snap instantly. Luckily, her training as a professional maid keeps her hands perfectly steady. A pale shadow glides upward through the water until she flicks her wrist. She lands a foot-long fish onto the ice. He recognizes the creature immediately. It is a lake whitefish, a very common sight in this frozen wilderness. Hayasaka curiously inspects the massive fish they just caught and drags it far from the hole so it cannot flop back in, asking if lake whitefish counts as salmon. She wonders aloud that if it does, it must be packed with rich fish oil in autumn and winter, perfect timing for a taste. As she drafts a quick plan for pan-searing it with their limited seasonings, he licks his lips, grateful to have a chef around since on his own. Best he could do would be a basic, primitive pan-fried fish. He is about to brag about his own rod when it suddenly twitches, but before he can celebrate, the line snaps clean in the middle, sending him lurching backward onto the floor as the fish gone. Talk about terrible luck. A broken line is normal for this budget gear, but with the exact same setup, the novice beside him just landed a fish with zero trouble while his failed, and the embarrassment is hard to hide. She giggles that she is the #1 fishing champion of this mysterious lake, then quickly unhooks and baits her line back in while he replaces his broken setup, with a confirmed catch secured there. Energy spikes as the cold and boredom completely vanish. They fish until noon, pulling in 3 lake whitefish in total, and she cheers that they can have a fish feast. He nods, satisfied since at least one of them came up on his line and he did not go empty-handed. They prep the fish right there, and although his cooking is mediocre, cleaning fish is his absolute specialty. The scaling and gutting happen in one fluid motion until the 3 are stripped clean in moments. The scraps go straight back down the ice, whole, both as an offering to the lake and to quickly hide the smell, which would otherwise attract the wolves. While he works, Hayasaka pokes her head up to scan, and the wolves are still prowling at a safe distance, showing no interest in moving closer. They decide to return to the camp office first because a long morning of fishing left them starving, and there is no reason to eat dry biscuits or oat bars when they have fresh natural ingredients. She chats happily on the walk back about what a lucky spot they found so close to the cabin. Lunch is simple but amazing. The fish is cut into large fillets to marinate for 12 minutes, then pan-seared and seasoned with rosehip. 2 fish leave them fully satisfied and with real wilderness ingredients. Her cooking skills finally shine. It is a genuine masterpiece. The taste is incredible. He is too busy eating to even talk. After eating their fill, they share a warm cup of tea, pack up their gear, and head out again. This time they skip the hut and march toward the houses on the far shore. At first the scenery keeps them going, but the massive frozen lake quickly gets boring, leaving them walking with hands tucked deep in and heads down 2/3 across as their legs grow heavy. A moving shadow catches his attention. The far shore shows lakeside cabins and sparse forest, backed by a sheer cliff rising nearly 100 meters, but they had been focused on the ice instead of the tree line. Looking closely now, he spots a herd of deer by the woods, a strong buck with long antlers, 2 dozen and 2 small fawns. Hayasaka points them out, and he instinctively touches his hip, wishing they had a ranged weapon. They slowly move a few steps toward the houses, and the deer, with sharper senses than any wolf, spot them instantly. The animals did not even have to try to hear them. A massive buck lets out a call. He calls out, and the entire herd bolts into the tree line. He sighs over the lost shot, then refocuses on the cabins. They sit in 2 separate clusters, only a few dozen meters apart. With each group holding just 3 or 4 houses, they decide to sweep the nearer cluster first. 2 of the houses are completely boarded shut, and Hayasaka AI tuts softly at the wooden planks. She tests them with her thin gloves, but the boards are nailed tight and refuse to budge. She asks if this is how the game works, and he nods. In the game, you cannot enter boarded houses at all. In reality, though, they could easily pry the planks off With the right tools, but without a crowbar handy, that task simply has to wait. They push into one of the open cabins, and a thick, musty stench hits them instantly. It is far worse than the trapper's cabin, making them both cough. He warns her to keep everything propped open while they search, or they will not survive the terrible air inside. He props open whatever he can find. This cabin is even smaller than the trapper's home. And even without much light coming in, they can see the entire interior at a single glance. A tiny room like this cannot hide much, just a few energy bars and beef jerky. There's also a flannel shirt in decent shape, although they already have enough warm layers. The shirt is lightweight and can easily be shredded into cloth for repairs, so into the pack it goes. Searching through both clusters, they salvage 2 boxes of salted biscuits, 3 canned goods, and several worn pieces of clothing, but the real standout find is a heavy blue toolbox. In the game, this item unlocks special crafting recipes. Here in reality, it holds wrenches, screwdrivers, and a few nails, all very useful extras. But what truly excites him is a heavy storm lantern sitting on a desk in one cabin. It has a solid metal body and thick glass, built to withstand the freezing winds. Once filled with oil, it is a lifesaver in a dark world with zero power. This lantern is exactly what they need. Talk about a massive stroke of luck. Hayasaka AI, thrilled by the discovery, smiles warmly as she helps him clip the lantern onto his backpack. She even calls it a wonderfully bountiful harvest. He glances over his shoulder to admire his look, axe at his waist, lantern on his back. He really is starting to look like a true master of wilderness survival. She cuts his daydreaming short, announcing that it is finally time for them. They head back home, gesturing toward a sky that has turned a fiery orange-red. Evening is fast approaching, and the temperature is already starting to plummet. They have cleared out every accessible house in both areas, leaving no reason to stay. They kick the packed snow off their boots and head out, but as they step onto the vast frozen lake, a sharp, freezing pinprick of cold lands right on his nose. He looks up and realizes a gentle snow has quietly started falling from above. Snow, he freezes in place, staring up as a light gray cloud drifts overhead. But over toward the northwest, a massive wall of dark, heavy iron gray clouds is rapidly building up, its threatening edges dyed a deep purple by the fading sun. Hayasaka AI drops her playful tone completely, asking in a tense, serious voice if those massive clouds are headed their way. They seem to appear out of absolutely nowhere. The innocent-looking gray cloud right above them is already beginning to dust the area. If that massive northwestern storm front rolls in next, a brutal blizzard is guaranteed. As for when it will hit, he grumbles silently that nature never gives a warning. In the endless dark, those questions mean nothing. The weather is far too unpredictable, he tells her in a rushed tone that he has no idea if they are coming, but if they do, it will be massive. They cannot afford to crawl along like this and must pick up the pace. They tighten the straps of their heavy packs and step out onto the frozen lake. At first, the snow falls lightly and straight down, the flakes tiny with absolutely no wind, and what lands on their heads is blocked by their beanies. Whatever lands on their shoulders is shielded by their heavy capes. They are barely halfway across the lake when the freezing wind strikes. Before the clouds even arrive, whipping up ice powder and whistling right past them. With a biting edge, he glances back at Hayasaka and sees her shivering from the sudden plunge in temperature. Though she is not completely exhausted yet, he grew up in. Having grown up in the icy north, this current chill is nothing compared to the freezing winters he remembers. But that pride vanishes in a second. Things are getting real. By the time they reach the ice fishing hut they used earlier, the thick clouds have swallowed the sun, leaving the sky a heavy leaden gray that feels ready to collapse. The snowflakes have grown thick enough to painfully sting their faces. It is not just the cold trapping them, it is the rapidly vanishing visibility. Earlier, the outline of the camp office was perfectly clear, but now he can barely spot the lake shore. He takes down the storm lantern hanging from his pack and lights it. The flickering orange glow pushes the shadows back just enough to reveal the path beneath their feet, and even though the heat cannot touch them through the thick glass, that warm light is enough to bring some strength back into their legs. He quickly tells Hayasaka to stay right behind him, since neither of them has a scarf and the wild wind drives snow straight into their mouths whenever they try to speak. He lets her shield herself behind his back to preserve her strength. Those last 100 meters are easily the hardest, and by the time his feet have gone completely numb, the shore finally emerges inside the lantern's dim halo. He He reaches back, grabs her wrist, and they pick up the pace as they climb the snowy slope and collapse straight through the door of the camp office. Hayasaka drops her heavy pack and collapses limply onto the small sofa near the door, sighing that she truly believed they were going to be buried alive by this brutal blizzard. She licks her dry lips and weakly admits that catching those delicious fish and finding this cozy cabin almost made her think they were playing some peaceful, cozy game, but now she knows it is a brutal survival challenge. He rubs his face in deep thought, and she watches him closely because she knows that when he spaces out, he has noticed something. He asks her if the room feels much colder than it did earlier, and she replies that it makes sense with the blizzard raging outside. He points out that the storm only just started, yet the temperature plunge is already severe. If this blizzard rages all through the night, the wind and freezing snow will only intensify. She realizes the danger instantly, sitting up to finish his thought that the cold will hit absolute zero by nightfall, and they must keep a fire burning all night. He agrees. Honestly, this weather is a nightmare. It changes on a dime and turns extremely dangerous, even though they have a decent supply of coal and firewood. In the bin, surviving tonight is going to completely drain their fuel. Another blizzard right after this would leave them helpless. She sighs, noting it is just one fuel crisis on top of their food shortage, always one disaster after another, but she slaps her cheeks to wake herself up, flashing a bright, hopeful smile as she says she believes the two. Neither of them will get stumped by this. His heavy mood finally lifts as he stretches his wrists and heads for the back door, saying he will go out first to fetch enough fuel for the night, but she jumps up from the sofa and tells him to wait, saying she is coming along. The blizzard outside has only gotten worse, making a quick fuel run to the back tank nearly turn him into a snowman. Hayasaka catches sight of his snow-white eyebrows as she helps him carry the heavy load inside, and the corners of her mouth twitch before she bursts out laughing, asking how he suddenly turned into an 80-year-old grandfather. He wipes his brow, answering that if they have gone Snow White, he must be at the 100-year level at least. She chuckles that he really gets serious about the strangest things. It is pretty cute. While she lifts the wooden frame heaped with coal and firewood, he takes it from her hands and heads up to the second floor. She watches him naturally take over the heavy labor, biting her lower lip as a flicker of something complicated crosses her eyes. Instead of following him, she heads to the first floor stove, grabs a frying pan, and searches the cabinet for ingredients since neither of them has eaten dinner yet. A freezing night like this calls for real heat in the stomach. From the stairs, he looks down at her by the cabinet and feels a quiet gratitude. This starting teammate has high combat power, a sharp mind and broad knowledge, plenty of solid skills, and a genuinely down-to-earth personality. If he had been paired with someone who lectured him about dieting on an icy night like this, terrified of one extra bite, he would honestly rather have survived completely alone. He gets the fire going while she whips up a simple meal, and the howling wind outside grows more intense, but the warm orange glow, the radiated heat, and the crackling fire are deeply comforting. She suddenly remembers a classmate who traveled through Nordic countries once, mentioning that sitting by a fire watching the snow was incredibly cozy, and she admits she finally gets it now. She edges her cold feet closer to the stove. Beside him is a stack of over a dozen books he is leafing through one by one for survival tips, hoping for a maple leaf country version of Robinson Crusoe, and he tells her there is nothing scenic to see in here and that a lookout tower would be the best place for that. She asks in surprise if there are actually lookout towers nearby, and he answers yes. There are several, and one is close. The mysterious Lake Lookout Tower is on his must-visit list since it might spawn a rare skill book in the grand scheme. Let's be real, a skill book that grants a whole new ability is the ultimate prize here. It is one of the most valuable things in this world, so he has no intention of missing it. They chat, then crawl into their blankets to sleep, and he makes sure to add some extra coal so they do not freeze. According to the system, their day was completely unremarkable, earning him little attention from the five gods. The following morning, Hayasaka and he open their eyes at the exact same time. She turns on her side, squints at him, and calls his name, her own hoarse voice startling her. His throat feels incredibly dry, like it is smoking, and he coughs and sits up. The instant his back leaves the warm blanket, the morning chill bites. Looking into the stove, he sees only a faint, dark red glow with absolutely no heat left. He admits it was a mistake. Swallowing hard, feeling the dry muscles of his throat rub together, he rolls out, fetching 2 cans of soda from the table, placing one at her bedside and drinking half of his in one. He tries explaining that the stove burned too hot, and they should have slept feet first, facing far away from it. Hayasaka, feeling as if spicy peppers had been stuffed right up her nose, rubs at it and takes a few sips from her can, then she cheerfully comforts him that they now have the experience now, lesson learned. She rolls out of bed and eyes the glass behind the stove, watching a pale wash of sunlight finally break through. Not much warmth to it, but it is still a welcome sight. She squints through the heavy frost, noting that the snow has likely stopped because the sky is clear, and he drains the rest of his can, heading down with her close behind. The moment they pull the door open, a cold wind floods in and shakes him awake. Hayasaka tucks behind him, resting her small hand on his back and rising on tiptoe over his shoulder to look total whiteout. A thick, fresh layer covers everything. No wind, no fresh snowfall, but this depth will make traveling tough. He tries a few steps and the deep snow swallows his ankles, almost spilling inside his boots. She decides against trying, leading him to conclude that they shouldn't venture too far today, just nearby, when she suddenly cuts him off and grabs his shoulder, pointing toward the open snowy slope opposite the camp office. He looks and sees nothing wrong at first, then notices the snow shaking. Wait, those white shapes are actually alive. But a few white creatures standing on the snow, occasionally twitching, but mostly still. He says in surprise that they are Cappadocia gamecocks. Their camouflage is incredibly strong. Without Hayasaka's sharp eyes, they would have walked right past them. The gamecocks, which had refused to show until now, are huddled and pushing against each other, almost packed tight. Hayasaka leans on the porch railing of the camp office, staring intently ahead, her tone bright with excitement, asking if they can hunt them. He recalls the game's mechanics. Forget pouncing. These birds are just far too alert. The usual approach is bows and arrows at range, or throwing stones. They have no bow, and when it comes to throwing, he has very little confidence in his aim. But she catches his eye and says she could try, explaining that her class once ran a dart-throwing stall at the school festival. He raises an eyebrow. Whatever it is, a club or a festival, every skill she has ever learned ends up tied to that school of hers. Conan has Hawaii, and she has her school, apparently. Either way, if she can hit a gamecock, it works for him. He crouches and rakes through the snow near the camp office for stones, while she warms her fingers and wrists. She takes the slightly sharp-edged stone he hands her, weighs it, and feels a flicker of regret, since although the technique for throwing small objects is similar, she is best with handled tableware like throwing knives and forks. See, one of her friends once asked which combat skill best suits a maid, and someone said throwing tableware, and although the inspiration came from a fictional character like Sakuya Izuyoi, she tried it and found she had a real knack, practicing for a while. Bare stones are not knives, but for sniping a few gamecocks they will do. She jokes that she is ready, sets her shoulder, twists her body, and flashes him a confident smile. Before he can even offer a word, she draws back, snaps her wrist, and 3 stones leave her hand at once. One grazes one stone clips a wing, sending it flapping away. Another strikes a second bird's head. It drops instantly. The third hits a target near the wing joint, not deadly but stunning. The bird is grounded while the rest of the flock scatters. He has no time to marvel. He sprints forward, dashing quickly to pin down the struggling prey, retrieving the dead bird too. He turns. She is standing there, hand on hip, looking proud. He gives her a thumbs up. That was seriously impressive. With an aim like that, seriously, who needs a gun? Endless meat is guaranteed. She laughs it off. Back on the porch, she inspects the birds, poking the thick, cozy down. The insulation feels incredibly strong. This makes perfect sense. In the game, it crafts excellent winter gear. Dissection falls to him. Luckily, his specialized skill makes the process effortless. He easily harvests soft down, 4 legs, and 2 large breast portions. As she plans dinner, she notices him prepping his boots and gloves. Is he heading back out? He nods. They have enough meat. But nobody can predict when the next freezing blizzard will strike. They must move now. He needs to bring in more firewood. She agrees, but insists he warm up first with hot sugary tea and breakfast. Heading outside, they notice the fresh snowfall covers the ground strangely. Broken branches remain in plain sight. They wander the thin forest together. Gathering wood quickly, she notes that hauling it all back is tiring. They need a better way. This method is too exhausting. Dropping her bundle, she steps onto higher ground to squint ahead. She does the math. Standing there, she looks toward the distant office. Carrying sticks back one small armful at a time wastes precious minutes. It would take 20 minutes or even half an hour per trip. Even working to exhaustion, they would not collect enough wood for tonight. Meanwhile, he squats before a massive fir branch shaped like a Y. In-game, chopping this would take 45 minutes of grueling labor. But real life is different. There are no system limits. But here is the catch. Reality does not have game limits. He examines the branch. As a clever plan takes shape, he remembers his childhood winters. He and his brother collected firewood from waste grounds. Playing with fireback then gave him plenty of practical experience. He tells her he has a plan. Grabbing the branch, he drags the massive wood down the slope to a clear, open path. It leads straight to the office. They can tie smaller sticks here. Utilizing his high intelligence, they set to work gathering every long piece. Each branch must fit into the V-shape without slipping out. They bundle the wood as thick as a calf and lash it. They use strips of cloth to secure everything tightly. After an hour of hard work, a dozen heavy bundles are ready. They lash the final bundles on tightly. Before they know it, more than a dozen are roped on, the rear so heavy that the front tip begins to lift. Lifting the wood, Hayasaka pants heavily, sore from all the squatting and bending. She asks if they should gather everything first and then figure out how to haul it. With just the two of them, it seems impossible, but he cuts her off by drawing out his whistle and giving it a quick wave. Her face immediately brightens. They have the sled dogs. Still, he doesn't call them over just yet because they will need a harness or rope first. After all, dogs can't drag heavy trunks with their teeth. So they agree. She will head back to the office to find rope or cloth, while he searches the surrounding woods for anything else worth salvage. From a high vantage point, he scans the area and spots a massive oak tree. Completely stripped of its leaves, he kicks himself for forgetting such an obvious spot, since even in this endless dark, one can find buried acorns under a giant oak tree. This rare food source could replenish critical nutrients, since Hayasaka will be gone for a while. He walks over to the base of the tree, crouches down, and starts digging. Using his axe, he clears the fresh powder and hacks through the hard, frozen crust. Beneath the ice, he begins turning up acorns one by one. It is almost satisfying, making him understand why bears love doing this. The steady work feels strangely comforting. Especially since every scoop yields a fresh handful, there seems to be no end. He wipes each one clean, dropping them into his backpack until the load grows heavy. The straps bite into his shoulders, prompting him to call it a day. These acorns are not going anywhere, he tells himself, slowly straightening his tired back. And then the quiet is instantly shattered by a low, menacing growl vibrating right behind him. Snow sprays as a heavy shadow charges. Instinct takes over, and he lunges forward. Rolling hard because his pack was unfastened, the precious acorns scatter across the snow. He scrambles up in a messy, snow-covered crouch, quickly turning to face the danger. A massive wolf lands heavily on the exact spot he had occupied a second ago. The beast is heavy and fierce, though he normally struggles to tell animals apart. He instantly recognizes this killer. It is the alpha that attacked them 2 days ago. You really know how to hold a grudge, he mutters bitterly under his breath. Knowing the beast cannot comprehend him, the wolf treats the sound as a direct challenge, baring its fangs viciously as it begins a slow, calculating circle around him. When he raises his arms in defense, the wolf suddenly lunges forward, attacking from the flank. If the Wish Corridor were like a game world with visible attributes, his strength, agility, and overall physical build would be completely average. But his reaction time, boosted by his sharp skills, is in another league. As the massive wolf launches itself forward, his pulse begins to race. The heat surging through his veins is not fear, it is pure, unadulterated rage. He had let it go. They had the upper hand days ago with 2 dogs. Yet they chose to spare it, and still, this monster refuses to walk away. The sheer unfairness of it fuels his rage, sharpening his focus in an instant. Power surges into his hands, his grip tightening until the wooden axe handle creaks. He slips under the leap, twists his body, and swings with everything he has. The heavy iron slams into the wolf's hind leg. It howls, crashing into the snow. It struggles to stand. Before it can recover, he drives forward with all his might, closing the distance instantly, and brings the heavy axe straight down on its head. One brutal, crushing blow, and the predator lets out a final whine and collapses. He pokes the beast with his axe. Finding no reaction, he confirms it is dead. He straightens up, only to realize his legs and hands are shaking uncontrollably. Was it just adrenaline? Maybe. He has absolutely zero real fighting experience. Seriously, how did a normal guy fight that cleanly? He has no clue. His chest pounds, calves cramping, before he can even process the shock. Hayasaka's voice suddenly echoes from a distance, calling out for him. She trots over with quick, hurried steps, seeing him turned around safely. She slows down, catching her breath. She looks at him and gasps. In pure disbelief, he actually took down a whole wolf completely alone. Feeling a bit self-conscious in front of the far stronger fighter, he shrugs. He modestly downplays the fight. Still, she circles him multiple times, checking for any hidden injuries before she finally turns her focus elsewhere. She points out that another beast means another pelt, bringing their total to 2. Then she notices the debris on the snow and asks if he found acorns. He says yes, explaining he dug them from under that big oak tree. She calls this place a real treasure trove and wants to join in. Her wilderness gourmet skill has made her obsessed with gathering natural ingredients. So she squats right beside him and begins digging away eagerly. She works tirelessly under the oak tree, searching for hidden treats. Meanwhile, he takes his axe to a fallen log to chop away small branches. He shapes the front into a slanted curl, turning it into a makeshift sled. He ties the 2 ropes she found to the back of the Y-shaped frame. With a quick whistle, he summons his 2 reliable sled dogs. Though she doubts her tailoring, making scrap cloth harnesses is quite simple. The dogs wait patiently, tails wagging, as he fits them and secures the ropes. Once the rigging is complete, she walks over, brushing cold snow from her hands. Her face wears a cute pout, prompting him to ask what went wrong. She compares their backpacks, complaining that he got tons of perfect acorns, while she spent forever digging up nothing but a few chewed-up scraps. He is caught off guard for a second, then realizes the reason. He tells her he just got lucky and found a spot missed by bears. Acorns are packed with calories, making them a favorite for local wildlife. Finding mere leftovers is perfectly normal for anyone gathering out here. His heavy, half-full backpack is actually the strange part. She narrows her eyes, realizing she forgot about the bears, and drops the matter. A few kilograms of food is still a solid harvest for them. He points out that if every tree yields even half of this, they are set. It will be more than enough, she agrees, crouching down to assist him. Together, they double-check the animal harnesses. She eyes their loaded supplies and estimates the firewood weighs nearly 50 kilograms. He confirms her guess, noting that her count ignores the massive trunk underneath the smaller bundles. That log alone is heavier than all the branch bundles combined. She wonders if 2 dogs can pull it all, but he gently pats them, telling her never to underestimate them. Pulling wood over snow is incredibly easy, especially with the camp office being so close, as he points nearby. He calls out and gives the order, and the pair steps off together, slow at first. Then trotting, tails wagging loose and relaxed, he tugs his hat brim, tightening the rope tied to the dead wolf at his waist, and strides after them, telling Hayasaka that the real question is not whether they can pull it, but whether they can keep up. By the time they catch the dogs at the front of the camp office, they have already been waiting a little while. He lifts the lid of the fuel box and pitches the firewood bundles in as fast as he can, with Hayasaka watching. The box filled to half full from over 20 bundles, smiling as she says it should burn. A long time, he is less cheerful because experience tells him thin sticks burn fast and cannot match large blocks or coal. Coal means going to the mine, and large logs mean he trails off, remembering the logging camps in the long dark, the places where workers used to fell large trees, strip the bark, and saw the trunks. The standard size of roughly 30 centimeters wide and 2 to 3 meters long in the game. Those piles are background texture, uninteractable, but Hayasaka and he are not players, and what exists here is real, so they can touch them. A few of those dragged back would burn for a very long time, and the nearest logging camp is close to the camp office, but this is only an idea for now because a trunk that size could weigh near 80 or even 100 kilograms, and even with the dogs, its shape is awkward to drag without a saw or sled. He keeps the plan to himself, and they continue collecting. The dogs cooperate beautifully. They find more Y-shaped branches for them to drag back inside the hour they last, and after they vanish, they drag in the few smaller bundles they have found in the surrounding area. Hayasaka leans against the back wall of the camp office, panting, and tells him her stamina is completely spent, and he feels sweat under his own thick Clothes, realizing the danger, he pulls her quickly inside so the cold wind cannot catch them damp and turn it into a chill. They each have a cup of black tea. And Hayasaka opens cans for lunch because her hands are shaking too hard to manage anything more complex. The good news is the fuel box is full and 5 or 6 large branches are stacked beside it, easily a week of burning. The price is that both of them are wrung out, and though it is barely past noon, neither of them can move. He had planned to rest a bit and then go to the ice fishing hut, but he lets that go. They spend the rest of the afternoon limp on the bed without moving, and it is only by evening that Hayasaka recovers enough strength to make dinner. He is not idle either, going outside to process the wolf carcass, harvesting the pelt and entrails again, and pitching the leftover meat up into a nearby tree, muttering how wonderful it would be if some wonder existed to strip parasites from raw meat automatically. Dinner is pan-fried fish fillets with flatbread and tastes excellent. While chewing, he tallies their reserves. All the fish on hand is gone. They ate lazy canned food at noon, and only 3 cans of peaches, 1 of tomato soup, and 1 of pork and beans remain. With his hoarder instincts, less than a week of food makes him anxious. Since he only feels safe with a shelf packed full, Hayasaka has been thinking about this too since she handles the cooking, and over dinner they set tomorrow fishing in the morning, cattails in the afternoon. The blizzard has stopped, though the air is still not as warm as it was a few nights ago, so he lights a fire to take the chill out of the room, and they head to sleep. Since the chosen by 5 gods talent awoke, every time he closed his eyes over the last 2 nights, disappointing line drifted into his mind, telling him his day was unremarkable and he had failed to get any real attention from the deities. Tonight, though, everything is different. A hazy red. Watch closely. A hazy red light blooms behind his eyelids, and the system notifications say he did well. Today, the god of courage has cast a glance his way, earning him a neat little reward. It is a perfect moment, dropping in just as he is about to drift off, and even after noticing the sudden change, he cannot keep his eyes open. Come morning, the bright sunlight clears his head instantly, making him sit up fast and pull up his system screen to double-check the notice. Hayasaka, who is still resting because yesterday completely exhausted her, gets startled and stares right at him, wondering if he has finally lost his mind, even though he has seemed totally fine all week without any warning signs. He quickly reassures her that everything is okay, explaining that his unique talent finally showed some life. He had actually brought up this ability to her back during their very first ice fishing trip, acting as a helpful sounding board since her own special talent is still asleep, even though the pentagram icon on her screen is already overflowing with thick dark mist and could fully activate at any moment. Hearing the word reward, she immediately rolls over and sits up, her eyes sparking with curiosity. Asking if he got anything cool, he shares what the system says his actions yesterday caught the eye of the god of courage, and a minor item has already been delivered. He looks around the room but notices absolutely nothing new, starting to wonder if the item was even sent, until Hayasaka points toward a small stool by the wood stove and asks if that is it. Sitting right there is a dark stone mounted on a small block of wood. He recognizes it instantly as a whetstone, just like the one they previously grabbed from the office. His lips twitch in disappointment. The grand god of courage, supposedly a powerful deity, and his gift is a simple whetstone. Seeing his face drop, Hayasaka reassures him that at least it was free, so he sighs and lets the frustration go because she makes a fair point. Besides, the minor reward matches the scale of the deed, which was just taking out one lonely wolf. Taking down a bear would pay better, but without any proper weapons, searching for a massive bear would basically be offering himself as lunch. But then Hayasaka suggests that since it is a gift from a deity, the item might possess some hidden properties, maybe incredible durability. He nods, deciding to go downstairs to grab their hand axe. The edge is pretty worn from cutting wood, hacking through thick ice, and digging up acorns over the past 48 hours, making it the ultimate test subject. He presses the worn metal against the stone, giving it a single slide. And get this, the handle suddenly feels so incredibly slick that he nearly drops it, pulling it back to inspect it. Before a second pass, a bright cold gleam flashes across the steel, completely honed with just that single motion. Hayasaka gasps in amazement. One swipe to fully sharpen is a massive time saver, making this a spectacular reward after all. He carefully tests the edge with a thumb. The lethal sharpness is unmistakable, leading him to believe this special whetstone does not just work fast but applies an extra sharpness buff, pressing his palms. Together, he bows deeply, offering a sincere apology to the god of courage for his earlier doubts, and swears that if taking out just one wild beast yields incredible utility gear like this, he will gladly hunt down every single predator in the region. After his recent victory, he is absolutely certain his incredible reaction speed makes solo wolves a total joke. Hayasaka catches his eager look, narrows her eyes, and warns him very seriously. She reminds him that despite these handy gifts, he must stay within his limits and avoid anything foolish just to chase rewards. She keeps watching him right through breakfast, and meeting that skeptical gaze, he scratches his head and tells her not to worry, that he won't do anything reckless, but let's be honest, he was staring at that whetstone. She is not convinced. She huffs that she will hold him to his word, keeping a close eye on him, making him raise his hands in surrender. A nice item. First thing in the morning lifts their spirits, and after joking around, they continue with the agreed plan, fishing in the morning and gathering cattails in the afternoon. They prepare much better this time. Both pack a small stool and a warm blanket for their legs, plus 2 books. In the endless dark, ice fishing can be completely hands-free using a tip-up device, which works like a rabbit snare. At least he thinks that is the name. His memory of it is pretty hazy, because he rarely used them in the game. Back at the camp office, he tried to craft some, but he just could not unlock the recipe. It remained locked. Manual fishing it is. He comforts himself knowing that fishing is his hobby. Anyway, the time by the hole is quite enjoyable. The water proves it, because despite snapping 2 lines, they catch 5 whitefish and a smallmouth bass. That last one is a fish he first discovered playing Stardew Valley. He spends about half an hour gutting the catch. Afterward, they gather more cattails by the lake. On their way back, planning to inspect them carefully indoors, he peels a whole cattail from top to bottom, finally pulling free the harvestable shoot from the game. He places the snowy white, tender shoots in a clean pan and opens his hands, asking Hayasaka to take a look. She activates her wilderness gourmet skill, gives him a solid thumbs up. They are completely edible. Better yet, she already knows exactly how to cook them. For the afternoon meal, she starts with her usual pan-fried fish fillets, a dish they never get tired of, before tossing the fresh shoots in to flash fry using the residual heat quickly, plating them right beside the fish. Her eyes sparkle as she tells him to try, and he eagerly pops a piece into his mouth. The shoot has taken on a faint amber color, tasting first of rich fish, then revealing a light, fresh sweetness from the water plant. The inside is wonderfully tender, juicy and crisp, resembling water chestnut. He praises her cooking. He stuffs another piece in while satisfied Hayasaka giggles and grabs her chopsticks. They had only gathered a few cattails on a whim, so the plate is empty in seconds. Hayasaka notes casually that they can harvest these often to secure a steady food supply, but that innocent comment sparks instant dread. Just when things seem perfect, reality hits. The line damage is severe. Half of their total supply is completely gone. If this rapid rate of line loss continues, they can catch maybe 10 more fish in this bitter cold that only provides about 2 days of solid eating, which they would have to pair with other things. New fishing lines require dried guts, but with only 2 sets of innards curing, they cannot craft much. While back at the cabin, he scanned the lake and noticed the local wolves were completely gone. The deer, however, still wander the far snowy bank near a distant cabin, and bringing one down would mean fresh meat, hide, and invaluable guts. They lack any ranged weapons, though. On a dry road, he could easily picture Hayasaka, their little superhero, sprinting with a throwing spear and bringing a deer down. But in this slushy and heavily packed snow, she could never catch a deer even if she ran herself ragged. As for him, setting aside his overpowered reflexes, he is only slightly better than her in stamina and no faster, so chasing is out. Hayasaka finishes her meal and, seeing him deep in thought, leaves him alone. She tidies her own dishes and starts prepping the acorns they hauled back. Wilderness gourmet is pretty extensive, since her regular skills would only allow her to bake with pre-made flour, but processing raw acorns is way beyond her. Now this talent guides her to leach the bitter tannic acid with water and even suggests acorn coffee or pancakes as eventual results. He snaps out of his thoughts, glances at her working away, and stands up to put his coat back on, planning to harvest more cattails while daylight remains. An afternoon of walking pays off quite nicely. At first, he targets cattails nearest to their shelter, but then remembers that even wild rabbits do not forage near their own burrows. Besides, these plants will not grow back this season, clearing out the nearest patch would mean starvation during a real crisis, since his energy is still high. He ventures much further out, returning with a heavy pack just as darkness begins to fall. Just as expected, the day had been entirely quiet, so his nightly status log matches the previous days, confirming nothing happened, and he has not caught the attention of the five gods. By morning, the pair hoist gear identical to yesterday and head straight back to the frozen Lake. Hayasaka quietly notes how fast time flies, realizing they have survived here for 5 days already, making today their 6th, survived through tomorrow. And they will mark a full week. Relief briefly softens her face as she points out that a 20th of their survival time has passed, wishing things would stay this peaceful forever. Sadly, her words turn out to be quite the jinx. By his calculations, the remaining fishing hooks and lines should have lasted for another 2 days and yielded 10 fish, but the universe has other plans. They sit down inside the hut, but all they hear is the sound of lines snapping. Within an hour, every single line is gone, leaving them with just 2 fish. Even Hayasaka, who always keeps her bright smile, begins to crack. She asks why the lines are so brittle today. Honestly, who can blame her? He rests his head, knowing there is no good answer. Fishing is officially over. She places her hands on her knees, turning to him with open confusion. What do they do next? He rubs his fingers, knowing their gut line is wet. Since they cannot use it yet, he decides they must search for more supplies. He suggests checking the other huts, his mind racing for a quick solution. Fishing gear is usually abandoned there, and several other huts dot the lake. So far, they have only explored one. The remaining shelters might hold treasures. Finding some lines only delays their real problem, but it buys them time. 2 days of fishing is enough for now. Hearing this, Hayasaka claps happily, praising his quick thinking, while wondering why she did not think of it. They drop their current catch back at the camp office and head out. Moving across the lake, Hayasaka stares at the quiet ice and softly speaks. Their luck isn't completely terrible. The fishing lines might be broken, but the wolves are finally gone. At least the walk across is safe, but he feels the exact opposite after tasting that first reward from being chosen by 5 gods. He only wants the next. He has already noticed how incredibly valuable these wolves actually are. Individually, they aren't even that strong. They drop useful pelts and innards on death, with a decent chance for bonus rewards. They really are the perfect prey to farm. The duo continues walking along the lake for a while until Hayasaka spots a narrow frozen river stretching off to the side. Asking where the path leads, he glances over and casually answers that the trail ends at Carter Dam, another famous spot on this map, and that they would pass several smaller locations along the way, including a circular snowy clearing. Rabbits gather, but then he suddenly trails off mid-sentence, a few steps up that river. And a quick turn onshore would put them right at that clearing where rabbits live and deer occasionally pass through. However, those animals aren't actually what he's thinking about right now. He's thinking about the hunting blind in that clearing, a small wooden shelter where a hunter crouches out of sight, peeking over the top, and the high chance those blinds have of holding hunting supplies. Bad luck still gets you bullets or food, while good luck can yield a bow or gun. Based on his memory from the 6 save files he just loaded, he thinks bows and guns do not actually spawn at this blind in the game, though he might be misremembering. Hayasaka pokes his arm, asking why he suddenly stopped, so he quickly hurries to explain his sudden idea. Her eyes light up instantly as she insists they absolutely must go there if there's a chance for a weapon. Seriously, who would pass up a gun? Still, step by step. And since they have already started searching the lake huts, they agree to finish those first, gather all the supplies they find, and then loop past the blind on their way back. Hayasaka muses that even just a bow would be enough for some light hunting, but then second guesses herself, saying a bow could handle wolves and deer, while a massive bear or moose would still be impossible. She turns the question on him with a probing look, and he thinks for a moment before answering that theoretically it's still possible, because the main character in the game can take down a moose with a bow, and bow hunting is a popular sport in real life. However, he has absolutely no confidence in himself since his own archery knowledge is limited to basic pulling. Remembering he never told her, he adds that there are bears on Mysterious Lake too, and her guard immediately rises at the news. He quickly tells her there is no need to panic, that a bear is much larger than a Wolf and very easy to spot against all this white. They will see it from a long way off and can easily avoid it, just like they did with the wolves. Her anxious mood quickly settles. By now, they have reached the far corner of Mysterious Lake, a U-shaped cove with one last ice fishing hut tucked away. Near the edge, their final target for the trip, he looks around to orient himself and points to the innermost part of the cove, asking if she can see the cave. There, she follows his finger and nods. He tells her that's the bear cave and theoretically it spawns a bear. However, the bear doesn't just stay near its den and since there's no sign of it now, it must be gone, as he describes the bear cave. He ducks into the last hut while Hayasaka follows close behind, and neither of them notices that the moment they step inside, a dark shadow emerges slowly. Out from the depths of the bear cave, Hayasaka AI whispers in delight as she pries another flattened can of sardines out from the gap between the wall and the cabinet. For some reason, this corner ice fishing hut is far better stocked than the others, yielding fish hooks, fishing line, 2 cans of sardines, and a small cache of snacks, and even a book wedged behind the cabinet, though the book sadly is not a skill book. Because the haul is generous, they sweep the place twice over, spending easily double the time they gave any other hut. Once nothing has been overlooked, they shed their backpacks and sort the supplies into neat piles. With everything organized, he heads for the door, telling her on the way out that there should be some burdock along this lake shore, and since he has never eaten this stuff and it is easy to gather, they may as well collect a bit. As he turns his head toward the lake shore, the corner of his eye catches the bulk of the hut, an oddly large shadow taking up most of his vision. Something is wrong, though, because the shadow seems to be rising and falling gently, and he wonders if the glare off the ice is playing tricks on him. He turns fully, and a huge crouching shape resolves into a pair of small black bean eyes locked on the behemoth snorts, a puff of white steam blowing from its nostrils, and a thread of sticky saliva even lands on his pant leg. His eyelid twitches as he confirms against all hope that the thing in front of him is a black bear. Hayasaka AI emerges right behind him, her body going rigid, but she keeps perfect discipline, holding still and studying it instead of screaming. Maybe no one has come through here for a long time, or maybe the bear has simply never seen a human, because the heavy North American beast just sizes them up rather than charging. She whispers to him that they should back away slowly, since it does not look set on attacking. Then, remembering her Jaru persona, she adds that she has picked up a little black bear knowledge from popular science shows. Privately, she thinks she could probably hold her own against this thing and at worst escape, but she has no taste for needless risk, and she is mostly worried he will get reckless and go after it for talent rewards. She is overestimating his appetite for trouble because he values his life, and while he could take a loan wolf, a bear with bare hands is out of the question. A bow at minimum, he murmurs his agreement. The bear shuffles forward and plants his left paw across the doorway, cutting off any retreat back into the hut, so all that is left is slow withdrawal. He reaches out at an easy pace, takes Hayasaka Ai's wrist, draws her behind him, and begins walking backward in tiny, careful steps. Bear Bro might be full or just groggy, because he only grunts and snorts and shows no urge to lunge. They open about 5 paces of distance, and neither of them turns to bolt, because a bear is far faster than a person, and a sudden run would only invite the chase. Just as they are starting to breathe, a wolf howl rolls in from the distance. Howls have been background noise for days, day or night, sleep or awake, and they have grown numb to them, but this one is catastrophic. Timing, the bear huffs sharply, lurches upright, leans forward, and unleashes a roar that leaves his ears ringing. Combat mode engaged, it drops to all fours and charges. He yanks the dog whistle from around his neck and blows it hard, and 2 sled dogs materialize from the void to plant themselves between them and the sled dogs brace, only to be tossed aside. One goes flying on impact, the other is slapped onto the cold ice. The beast is already charging. It targets Hayasaka AI, seeing her as the easier, smaller prey. His pupils contract. His mind kicks into overdrive, instantly sketching a plan. His reflexes are fast enough to shove her completely clear and nimbly leap backward himself. A crazy plan, like trying to slide under a massive Siberian tiger to slice its belly, but he trusts his reflexes. She is already bracing to jump when his hand catches her backpack, sliding her 2 steps away. He pulls his hand back and plants his foot to pivot, but the ice groans beneath him. The fresh dusting of snow over the frozen lake is murderously slick, and in Hayasaka eyes wide-eyed view, his foot slips right out and he crashes hard. On his back, the beast, clawing empty air where her head just was, swings its massive head toward him as he sprawls. He lands squarely on his tailbone but manages to keep his head from cracking the ice, avoiding what would have been the most embarrassing death in the world, no joke. Wish corridor, the pain in his tailbone is blinding, but there is no time to rest. Because the bear's heavy paw is coming down, the same slick ice that dropped him now denies him any traction to roll away, so he rips the pack off his shoulder and thrusts it up as a makeshift shield. The paw crashes down on the pack with the thick book and torch absorbing most of the heavy blow, the torch snapping clean in half, sending him sliding backward across the ice for several meters as a painful grunt is squeezed from his throat. Nothing is broken, but his arm is going to bruise badly. From Hayasaka Ai's perspective, he just took a direct hit and let out a cry of pain, making her think he is gravely injured. The realization that he saved her only to end up like this triggers a rage she cannot contain. She yanks the hunting knife from her pack, its edge gleaming cold from the god of courage's whetstone, deciding that since this beast has clearly marked them as prey, she will take the initiative herself. She weighs the weapon, narrowing her eyes as combat calculations run lightning fast. Her partners slip, reminding her to watch her footing, but watch out, the bear gives her no time to think, opening its jaws and lunging to finish him. Both dogs scramble back to their feet, unsteady but loyal. One clamps onto the beast's hind leg while the other drives into its soft underbelly, with the monster distracted. Hayasaka AI leans low and slides forward, using the slick ice to her advantage, gliding right alongside its head and driving the sharp hunting knife toward its eye. The beast's movement sends the blade glancing off the bone just above the eye instead, a shallow cut, blood instantly blinding its vision on that side. He is fully recovered by now, so he grabs the broken half of the torch with his good hand, jamming it hard onto the beast's snout. Blinded in one eye and with its nose slammed, the bear flinches back. He pulls a match out, striking it one-handed against the wood, and presses it to the oil-soaked rag on the broken torch. A hot flame leaps up and licks across the bear's nose. Half-blind, snout-seared, dogs tearing at its rear. The bear finally retreats, swatting both of the loyal dogs into bursting bubbles and charging off toward its dark cave with a strain. A wailing roar echoes. Hayasaka AI exhales, the fight draining from her eyes. She trusts her throwing arm, but the bear is turned away now. A knife to the rump would only cause a minor wound and lose her only blade. It is not worth it. She tosses it aside and crouches beside him. The fake Jaru act is completely gone as she urgently asks how badly he is hurt. Isekai answers that he thinks he is fine, pressing his sharply aching forearm. He can still make a fist and straighten the arm, just a bad bruise. Her legs go completely weak with relief. Thank goodness, she whispers. Secretly, Isekai is slightly annoyed since his plan was to save her with effortless cool. Instead of an elegant escape, he had to shove her away and nearly died. But looking at her panicked face, his annoyed mood completely reverses itself. She is fussing over him as if he were Lady Kaguya herself. He wonders if this terrifying bear encounter just spiked her affection for him. He lets the thought drift, no time for that. His arm hurts too much for any romance subplot, and she tells him to take it slow. She drapes his arm over her shoulder, glancing at his face as they slowly rise. Staring up close, she quietly decides she needs to sit him down and be honest. It is finally time to tell him the truth, no more secrets. The grueling walk back is agonizingly slow. His arm is not the only problem. With his tailbone throbbing, he can barely shuffle forward, let alone run or jump. Mercifully, the howling wolf pups that triggered the bear never actually show up. That is incredibly lucky, because in their battered shape they could not fight back. Yet Hayasaka AI quietly fumes, knowing she would have slaughtered them in pure rage. But even shuffling forward is exhausting, and his body demands a break. They take shelter in several ice fishing huts along the way to rest. She generously hands over her entire daily ration of hot black tea to him. She sips lukewarm water herself, complaining that they desperately need a thermos. They cannot keep boiling water at every stop just to avoid freezing drinks. He mentions that thermoses exist in this game, though they were added late. He rarely used them and cannot remember where they usually spawn. She playfully suggests he simply summon one, using his talent rewards. As they chat, a freezing, sharp whistle of wind suddenly picks up. Peering outside, she spots gloomy gray clouds and quickly helps him to his feet. She warns him that heavy snow is coming and they must push forward. Cold flakes are already falling by the time they reach the camp office. She guides him up to the second floor, getting him comfortable on the bed. Then she quickly rushes back out to gather extra firewood before the temperature drops too low. While she works, he slowly props himself up to assess the damage. Peeling off his heavy jacket, he rolls up his sleeve to inspect his forearm. It is a nasty, purple bruise, looking awful despite the gear absorbing the blow. Without proper medicine, he simply has to grit his teeth and bear the pain. He decides to put all hunting on hold until he fully recovers. Instead, he will focus on drying animal innards for fishing lines and snares. He will stick to safer methods like trapping rabbits and fishing for now. She walks upstairs with a frying pan, planning to make flatbread. The pan-fried chicken waits. She kneels by his bed, asking if it is really that bad, her brows knitting. Hard, none of her usual cheerful energy is left, and he tells her not to look so. Grim, it is only bruising, nothing broken. She bites her lip, offering absolutely no answer. Her hand reaches toward his bruise, hesitating as if she is afraid of hurting. Iman pulls back halfway. She turns to the stove, lighting the fire a touch. Clumsily sets the pan down, pours some oil and rotates it slowly. He begins to call her name to lighten the mood, but she cuts him off, taking a deep breath, and tells him there is something she needs to say.